All righty. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to have you all on this afternoon. Got 1 o'clock sharp here, so we'll go ahead and get started. We'll have a little bit of a slow start here just in case some people are still hopping on. But my name is Katie Gnagi. I am the Housing and Community Development Coordinator from here at the Federal Home Loan Bank. I know, a nice mouthful there. Excited to be doing disbursement training with this is disbursement training for owner-occupied rehabilitation projects. So if you are not an owner-occupied rehabilitation project, this may not be the right training session. We've got a couple more coming up later this week if you are doing down payment assistance or and I'm happy to get you those links. But otherwise, this is owner-occupied rehabilitation. Gonna do a keep front just concerning the presentation, how this is going to work today. There we go. The presentation is being recorded. I know this is the big question that we get most of the time. This presentation is being recorded and will be posted on the AHP public website following this afternoon's presentation. So we're hoping to have that up here, but may give us just a day or two just in case we have any technical issues. This will be good, so you can refer back to this presentation or have others from your organization watch it later if they would like to receive a form of training. At the conclusion of this training, I will also be sending an email to all the participants with a copy of the slides from the presentation. So if you need to panic, rush, and write everything down, you'll get a copy of these slides later. Email. That email will also include the name and the email address for the analyst who is assigned to your project. So each project has a specific analyst that'll be reviewing your disbursement requests. That will be your main point of contact when you are working through disbursements or with any questions that you may have about the AHP process as a whole. As much as I would love to keep up with all 80 some of our projects myself, a lot more efficient to have all reviewers help answer your questions. So as we're going through the presentation today, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function within your toolbar. Those Q&A questions, that's different than the chat function. So just make sure you're using Q&A. The things for the Q&A will come directly to me so I can answer those questions throughout the presentation. I will periodic breaks to answer questions throughout, but if I do not get to one of your questions or if you have additional questions later, please feel free to reach out to the analyst. Their email address send you, and they'd be happy to assist you with any additional questions you may have later or that I cannot cover today. Okay, before we hop into content, just want to give a quick high-level overview of what we're planning to cover today. So the first thing that we're going to cover is some highlights from the AHP implementation plan. So that is our main guiding document with the rules concerning the AHP program. We're going to cover the things that are important to disbursement requests specifically. Then after that, we're going to move into forms. So all of the disbursement forms that you'll need to submit with each of your requests, we're going to go through some examples, talk about important key points, some things that, tend to be common errors made. Give you some examples so you can see that. Then we're going to look at the AHP public website. I'm going to show you where you can locate all of those forms that we go through, all of our guides and resources, as well as other helpful tools that we have for you. And then lastly, we will go into AHP Online itself, and we will actually walk through a real disbursement request, and I'll show you how to complete a disbursement request and submit that into us. So that's kind of our game plan for today. So we'll go ahead and hop right in and start talking about implementation plan highlights. Disbursements are funded on a reimbursement basis after rehab completion. So this is a reimbursement program. So you guys, as the sponsor organization, if you are a sponsor online, you are mainly responsible for the disbursement process, though I know we may have some members online that are on here for educational purposes as well. So this organization will go out, you will bring in the applicants or go through applicants, decide who qualifies, income qualify them, everything like that. You complete whatever work may be needed, whether that's you guys yourself doing the work or a third-party contractor. Either of those is acceptable. You will have the work done, you will pay for the work, and then you will submit a disbursement request into us with all the forms and all that good stuff, and we will reimburse on the back end of that request. When you are submitting a disbursement request, that disperse down to the nearest dollar. So any change that you have on the end, our system really doesn't like. It's kind of a funny quirk of our accounting system. We can't disperse any change. So you'll want to add up all of your costs, all your invoices, your inspection, all that good stuff, and then wipe the cents off the end. And that will be your disbursement request amount. AHPs cannot be used for the repayment of other debt. We don't really have this issue a ton with rehab projects, but nonetheless want to cover it anyway. The AHP can't be used for credit card debt, any other personal loans, things of that form. This is strictly for rehabilitation work and the associated expenses. All right, non-occupying co-borrowers and co-owners are not permitted. Sorry, I just got to know. Sound is fading in and out. Rachel, do you know on my end if I'm having a friend from the bank here?
Katie, try turning off your camera.
Okay.
So it
We're going
just
to try turning
has
off
to
my
do with audio.
camera and see if that helps. Okay, I'm going to try a little bit further, but if you're still having issues, please feel free to put that in the chat and let me know. Okay, going back to non-occupying co-borrowers and co-owners. No, non-occupying co-borrowers and co-owners are not permitted. So you will want to make sure that you're checking ownership on the property first and foremost. We'll talk about ownership documentation here in a little bit, whether that's looking at a deed, a property record card, something of that form. And making sure that there are no non-occupying co-borrowers or co-owners. Again, we generally don't provide a lot of exceptions around this at this point, so please make sure you're checking that. If you have additional consideration, please make sure that you reach out to us prior to completing any rehabilitation work. And we will review that situation before any money is spent, so we can figure out if that is a situation that we can provide an exception around or not. All right, manufactured housing. If you are working with any manufactured housing, it must be affixed to a permanent foundation state. So we can't do any sort of mobile homes, things like that. Has to be affixed to a permanent foundation and be titled this real estate. All right. Project sponsors, again, we are asking our sponsors to maintain and provide backup documentation upon request. All this really means is that you're going to be submitting a lot of documents to us. We just ask that you please make sure that you're keeping a copy of those somewhere on your local computer. However, do that. If you do paper copies, that's great. Just trying to make sure that we have an extra copy just in case the worst thing happens, the system goes down for some reason. I've seen it happen, but nonetheless, computers can be computers. So just ask that you keep a copy of those somewhere on your purse side, just in case we lose anything on our computer system. All right, projects are limited to 8 open unfunded disbursement requests at any given time. Working on disbursement requests, you will be submitting them via AHP Online, which is the system you use to submit your application if you worked on the application process. You are submitting them, you can submit to 8 at any given time, and then the system will stop you from submitting anymore until you fund additional requests. So this does not include any requests that you've initiated in the system but not submitted to us. So you can initiate them and be working on them. It only starts to count towards that 8 to us here at the Federal Home Loan Bank for review. And then, of course, anything that's already been funded is not going to count toward it. Those, of course, money has gone out the door, and we are good to go on those. So the reason that we do this is we're trying to make sure from an accountability end on our end, as well as our sponsor end, trying to make sure that we're getting through disbursement requests, we're getting back in a timely manner, and getting that money out the door as quick as we can. Okay. Modifications. Hopefully, modifications are not something you worry about too much, but nonetheless, we like to cover it now just so that you have the information. So, modifications require an effort to cure at a good cause. What a modification is it's regarding your scoring commitments that you made in your application. So, things like financial education, special needs, rural households, that whole in your application and that are listed in your AHP agreement. If you are working through your project and you are realizing that you are not going to be able to meet one of the commitments made in your application, that's when we may need a modification. So that modification would be to either remove or reduce the next required scoring commitment. And that is what requires that effort to cure and a good cause. So these can go hand in hand a little bit. What we're looking for is we want to see that your organization has put in effort to try and meet that commitment, whether that's, partnering with organizations that can help bring in individuals or applicants that may meet a special needs category or a large units category or something like that. Or you're advertising to specific populations. We want to see that effort to cure, and then the good cause again kind of goes hand in hand. If those things are just not panning out with the applicant, then we've got that combined effort to cure and good cause. Now, once we have that established, the project also has to continue to score high enough to be approved in the AHP funding round that you were funded in when we remove the points. So you received points for the specific commitments made. When we reduce or remove a commitment, we also have to reduce or remove the points associated with that commitment that were earned. So when we remove those points, project needs to stay within the range of funded projects for specific funding year. So for all of our projects online today, most likely you're all 2025 projects. So you would need to stay within the range of funded projects for 2025. All right. Couple more things. This is more on the legal end. Whoops, sorry. There we go. The bank, at its discretion, can reject disbursement requests for which we have not received the requested additional information or clarification within 30 days of our request. Now, before you panic on me, I promise we're not just going to reject things out of nowhere. What this is talking about is if we have sent an email to your organization requesting a specific piece of information and we get completely ghosted, not getting any responses to emails, no response to phone calls. We're just getting no answers whatsoever. Nobody's communicating with us. This is what that's referring to. If we go 30 days without hearing anything, then we do hold the right to reject that disbursement. Now, if you're communicating with us, you're communicating with your analyst and talking about the work you're doing to get the documentation needed, things like that, then that is fine. We're not going to reject for that reason. We just ask that you communicate that bullet point there. Just make sure you're communicating with us on what's going on so we that know on the back end and can keep moving forward with our disbursements. Okay, the bank staff is also going to be monitoring your commitments and can place a project on the punitive list. So all those scoring commitments we were just talking about in regards to modification were to be tracked throughout your project life cycle to make sure that you guys are staying in compliance. So let's say that you are half of your units have to meet the special needs scoring commitment. When you're about halfway through your project, we want to make sure that you're about halfway done with that special needs commitment as well, give or take a few units. So we're going to be tracking that for all of your scoring commitments. And the reason we're doing it isn't to be mean or we're trying to just throw a bunch of people on the punitive list, I promise. We're trying to keep our projects from ending in non-compliance because if our projects end in non-pay all of the subsidy back for the entire project. And we do not want to do that and don't generally do that. So that's the reason that we're watching those scoring commitments and that a project may end up on the punitive list or on a disbursement hold. That punitive list entry, that disbursement hold would just be saying, all right, we're going to put a pause on the project and you need to only submit units that meet a specific commitment for a little bit. And then once you get caught up, we'll re-project to submit whatever you would like. regarding your disbursement requests. Okay. The bank may also suspend or debar a member, sponsor, or owner from AHP participation if there is a pattern of noncompliance or a single instance of flagrant noncompliance. Again, something we don't deal with hardly ever, but nonetheless have to throw out there. If there is any sort of illegal activity, forgery, or all of those fun things, the right to suspend a bar in that case, again, very, very uncommon, but nonetheless, an important note to make. Also, the bank holds in its discretion to grant exceptions to certain provisions in the implementation plan. So the implementation plan, like I mentioned, these are highlights from that document. It's going to have all those rules, policies like that. We might be able to provide exceptions to certain provisions in the implementation plan, but if you know that you are violating a certain provision in the implementation plan, we ask that you please provide us that information prior to spending any money, prior to doing your rehabilitation work, because if it's something that we can't provide an exception around, then unfortunately you would be out that money if you did spend it already. So that's just something to know. There's certain things in our implementation plan that are federal regulation. We cannot provide exceptions around them. So we don't want you to get stuck in that. So the main things that may cause a need for an exception are within the disbursement request. There's a specific screen, and I will show you where those are here in a little while. If you are answering one of those questions no, one, the system is going to ask you for an explanation, and two, that is probably a good indicator that you may need an exception. So you can go into the system and kind of keep track of what statements are you're certifying in each disbursement request, and make sure you're checking those things ahead of time. Okay. This screenshot here is a direct screenshot from Exhibit A of the implementation plan, and this is regarding our project cost guidelines. So a couple notes that I want to make in here. Your projects, of course, are owner-occupied rehabilitation projects. So those are the spots that you're going to want to refer to. The thing is that we do not allow any developer or contractor fees. So if you hire a third-party developer or contractor to manage the rehabilitation work on your behalf, something like that, we cannot cover expenses regarding that. We will talk about the sponsor fee in just a minute and how you may be able to utilize that to help with those fees if you need. But if you are going to hire a third-party developer, those costs are not permitted for use of AHP funds, at least. We will be completing a construction cost reasonableness review, which I'm going to cover here in a few slides. So I'm going to skip that for just a moment and move to the owner-occupied rehabilitation expenses line. Your rehabilitation expenses paid with AHP subsidy must be a minimum of $3,500 per unit. This excludes all the fees that we're about to talk about. This excludes inspection fee, sponsor fee, homebuyer education fee. It is strictly the direct rehabilitation costs, so the things that would show up on your contractor estimate. Those need to total at least $3,500 per unit that you are working on. All right, other fees. If you have the home ownership education scoring commitment, this is specifically for those projects that have the home ownership education scoring commitment. If you have a homeowner who completes the course, you are allowed to charge $2 fee per unit to help cover the expenses of that class. That can be charged to the AHP funds if they do take the class. The other fee that you are allowed to charge is what we call our sponsor fee. So for rehabilitation projects, this sponsor fee in general, I should say, is a fee that we allow our sponsor organizations to charge to help cover your expenses for running this grant. We know it takes a lot of time and a lot of documentation set to submit all the disbursements, all of those good things. So we allow you to charge a sponsor fee to help cover your expenses on your end to run this grant program. For our rehabilitation projects, your sponsor fee maximum per unit is the greater of 10% of the rehabilitation costs, $1,000. Now, the 10% of rehabilitation costs, if you have had previous projects with us, this guideline has changed slightly as of this week, actually. So you probably have received an email if you have a prior year project with us this week regarding the 10% calculation. The 10%, when you are looking at that figure, is you can take 10% of the direct rehabilitation costs. So similar to that $3,500 per unit that we were talking about earlier, you can take 10% of the AHP paid rehabilitation costs, the construction costs, or $1,000, whichever is higher. So if you use $20,000 in direct rehabilitation expenses, 10% of that would be $2,000, which is greater than 1,000. So you can charge up to the 2,000 because that's the greater of the 10% versus the 1,000 ability workbook, which we'll cover here in a little bit. It is a workbook that you'll fill out with every disbursement request. It goes through that the different fees, and it will flag anything that is over guidelines. So you will be able to see that within your feasibility workbook if you run into any issues. All right. Couple of things on deadlines and reporting. We're going to start with deadlines. Disbursement requests must be submitted no later than 90 days from completion date. So there's a couple of important definitions to throw in here. So when we're talking about the rehabilitation completion date, this is the date that the last contractor finishes work on the home and leaves the property. So if you have multiple contractors doing work that are coming over a series of days, it's the date that the last one finishes work on the home. Now, we do require that a third-party inspection be completed on all over that here in a little bit, but the inspection may happen after the rehabilitation completion date. So the rehab completion date is the date the last contractor steps off the property, not necessarily when the inspection is done. So, apologies, I got a notification. We're having some trouble with audio. We're working on that in the background. So you have 90 days from the point that these work on the home to submit the disbursement request into us. So from that point, the submitted point as well has a little bit of a caveat or a definition to it as well. So submitted means that you have both sponsor and member approve the disbursement. So when you submit a disbursement request into us as a sponsor, you click submit on it, and then an automated email will go to the member contact at the bank you partnered with on your application. A automated go to them, and then your member must also approve that disbursement request. So just make sure you're keeping that in mind. The 90 days is when the member has approved the disbursement request. At that point, it will have been received here at the Federal Home Loan Bank. So just keep that in mind with the 90 days. All right. Remaining deadlines, a minimum of one disbursement request has to be submitted within 12 months of AHP application approval. So from this point, you guys were awarded, if you're a 2025 project, your application was approved on December 19th of 2025. So you have 1 year from that point, so until December 19th of this year, to submit your first disperse into us. And again, that means that you're going to submit all the way in to being member approved for us. So there is the potential opportunity to extend that date for 1 6-month period if necessary. Hopefully, we'll be able to hit that 12 months, but if you do end up needing that extension, we'll talk about that as we get closer to the 12-month deadline there. All right. The next deadline comes a while later. So all requests for the chat here. Let me cover these really quick since it talks about the 12-month. Questions about 12-month being reduced to 6 months. For those that are familiar with changes that just happened to the 2026 implementation plan, the 6-month deadline is applicable to our 2026 round and later. So for 2025 projects, it remains 12 months. For future project years, it will be 6 months. And then for those asking when the first disbursement submission can be made, it could be made as soon as you'd like to launch all of our projects off in AHP Online. I know right now you guys can't see the projects quite yet. Those are going to come available here in the next week or two, and then you are free to submit whenever you are ready. Okay. Perfect. All right. So 42-month deadline. Subsidy, or sorry, excuse me, HP disbursements all must be submitted within 42 months from the project. So this is looking way down the line. 42 months for the 2025 projects is going to be June 19th of 2029. I know that sounds forever away, but it always sneaks up on us, all right? That's 3.5 years from your project approval date. All disbursement requests need to be submitted by that date. Again, that's June 19th of 2029. So you've got time, but just keep them as sneak up. So what we're talking about again is that they're sponsor and member approved by that date. From that point, we here at the Federal Home Loan Bank have another 6 months to get all of those disbursements approved. So that 48-month deadline in the last line is talking about getting all of those funds out the door to your organization. And we are done with the project by the 4-year mark, which is going to be December 19th of 2029. Okay. Couple things on reporting. There's not a lot of reporting requirements outside of the disbursement requests themselves. That's going to be the main bulk work that you'll be doing over the next 3.5 years or so. But there are a few reporting requirements I do want to cover. The main one being our semi-annual progress reports, or SARs, as we like to call them. So twice a year, once in January and once in July. All of our project sponsors have to provide a SAPR report to us, which just gives us an overall viewpoint of where your project is at. So we put all of our projects on disbursement hold, not as a punitive measure, but just to make sure that all and what you'll do is you'll go into our system, you'll get an automated email telling you one's due, first of all, and then you'll go into the system, you'll fill out the report. It's fairly short. We have a user guide for it, and I'll show you where that is on the public website. So that will guide you through the steps of filling out that document, or excuse me, that report. And it just gives us, again, that high level overview of all of our projects, where you're at, making sure making progress towards completing on time and ending in compliance. Watching all of your scoring commitments as disbursements are being submitted and things like that. Every once in a while, it's just helpful for us to get that high level look at all of our projects, make sure everybody's staying on track and that everybody's going to stay in compliance. Because at the end of the day, we want all the money to go out the door and stay out the door. Okay, so that's semi-annual progress reports. The only other reporting requirement is our project completion report. Done with your project, as in you have submitted all of your disbursements, we've funded all of them, the money's all out the door, and you're done. At that point, you'll submit what we call our project completion report. You will be submitting that within 2 months of the project completion date. And it's a very short report. Again, there's a user guide on the public website. I won't go into too much detail today because it's so far off that you'll forget anyway, because it's just so long away. But that report, very short, just pretty much certifies that you complied with laws during your project and that you as the sponsor were integrally involved in handling the rehabilitation work and managing that on behalf of your homeowners. All right. A few definitions. I'm not going to read these word for word, but do want to just cover quickly what they are here for. So first, more AMI definition. The main thing I want to point out here when we're dealing with targeting categories, so when you say you're targeting to households at 80% of area median income and below, 50% and below, we use the USDA income limits. We do publish those limits on our public website. I'll show you where you can find those income limit caps. They are updated on a yearly basis, and we will send out a mass email when we do update our income limits in our forms. It's usually sometime in the late summer. But again, we use the USDA. So just when you are working with our program, I know that some other programs may use HUD or other standards, but we do use the USDA. The other definitions on here are for co-borrower, co-owner, and co-signer. So this is big when we're dealing with that non-occupying co-borrowers and co-owners rule. We do not allow non-occupying co-borrowers and co-owners, but we do know that our definitions may differ from some lender. Our definitions up here, just so that you can see them and know what we are defining as a co-borrower or a co-owner. Co-signers are okay if there is a co-signer on a loan for any reason, but co-borrower and co-owner are the main ones that we're focused on there. These definitions do come directly out of Exhibit E, as an elephant, of the implementation plan. So if you'd like to view these further, you are welcome to look at Exhibit E of the implementation plan. Few more quick definitions. The main one I want to cover on this screen is regarding household. So when you all are qualifying households for the grant money, when we're considering income, we want to make sure we're including all individuals who currently or will occupy the house or residence. So we want to consider if there's going to be somebody that moves in as a result of the rehabilitation work that is completed, something like that. We want to make sure everybody who currently or will occupy the home is included in the household count. When we're talking about income specifically, we do want to make sure we have our household count right. So that includes minors, adults, whoever is living in the home, because our income limits are based on the number of people who live in the household. So when we're talking about income itself, the actual numbers, we only include the income of adults. So those that are 18 years of age and older, you do not need to include the income of minors in your income calculation. The one caveat that we may put to that is that if there is a minor that's receiving Social Security benefits, then those benefits are generally paid to an adult on behalf of the child or the minor. So we do include that as income of the adult since they are receiving those funds to help supply for that minor. Okay. All right. So this gets us to kind of the good chunk of this, which is our forms. So this slide right here is a documentation checklist of the you will need to submit with every single disbursement request. There is a form, like I should say form, but there is a version of this checklist, public website. I'll show you where that is in a little bit, but this one just has a little bit of extra detail for you. So we're going to go through each of these specific documents. We'll do a couple examples on some of these, specifically the feasibility workbook, the final cost certification, and then just talking about some details on the remainder. But I do want to note out the gate, I'm going to talk briefly about income today, but I am now into a ton of detail. So the reason for that is because one, we could spend a whole 3 hours just talking about income. There's so many details and caveats to each type of income. But also the other reason is that we have an income calculation guide on our website that does a really great job of going through the most common types of income. It's pretty comprehensive. Goes through the most common types of income, the type of documentation that you need to submit, and then how to fill out income calculation workbook, which we'll look at briefly here, using those income documents. So all those resources are under the income calculation training section of our public website. I'll show you where that is in a moment, but I will just give you a brief look real quick at the income calculation workbook. While we're looking at this, I did get a question about the kids' Social Security benefits. Yes, you do put Social Security benefit for the adult. So we count that as income as the adult rather than the minor. So it does not go under the minor. But the income calculation workbook, I'm going to open one just real quick here to give you a look and then just cover some really high level things regarding that workbook there. So let me pop one open. Okay. So this is an example of an income calculation workbook. Let me make it really bigger here. Here we go. So this is just filled out with random information. I just plugged in a random person's name, so I promise no personal information here. But the big things that I want to talk about here, making sure state and county, this corresponds with the state and county for the property that is being rehabilitated. So just make sure that that is what you're selecting there. Then the program enrollment date. This is probably one of the biggest key things to understand when it comes to income, because this is going to drive what documentation is acceptable and things that form. So this is where we see the most confusion regarding income is really on this program enrollment date. So the enrollment date for our purposes is the date that you have collected all the necessary income documents from all household members to complete this workbook and do the actual income calculation. The reason that this date is so important is because a lot of our guidelines regarding how old your income documents can be are based on this date. So most documents in general, again, there are caveats to this, but in general, your income documents need to be dated within the 60 days prior to the enrollment date. So for the case of this one, we're going to be looking at the 60 days prior to January 1st of 2026. And that needs to be all income documents are dated within that time frame. So we want to make sure that we're looking at documents that are all from a similar time so that we're doing an accurate calculation of income at a specific period in time. Our that things like Social Security, we know they get one letter a year, things of that form. All of that is covered in the income calculation guide. So again, I'm going to defer to the guide for most of those questions you may have. I'll show you where to locate that guide on our website so that you may review it. If you are working on income at all, I highly, highly recommend that you read that guide in full. I know it's a 20-page document or so. It does have a lot of pictures, but please check out that guide. If you have any specific questions regarding income or a situation you're dealing with a specific homeowner, please don't hesitate to reach out to your analyst and ask those questions. We would rather you ask than end up getting the wrong documents and then we're trying to get the correct documents a few months later, things like that. So please send any questions you have if anything is confusing or you have a specific scenario you are unsure about. Okay. Regarding the rest of the workbook, I'm not going to cover everything in too much detail because the guide is pretty good at going through how to fill this out. The main thing with the household member tab, so you'll fill out a list of all the people who live in the household. This includes minors in this list. So this is just the household count, making sure that we have the right number of people. And this is what tells me what income limits to use. So the income limit built into this workbook. They are automatically built in, so you don't have to worry about trying to calculate AMI yourself. You can see that the AMI is automatically calculating based on the state and county entered as well as the program enrollment date. So make sure you're entering all those household members here so that we have the correct number of people so we're using the correct income limits. Again, though, for we're actually including the income, that's going to be just the adults that are 18 and older. For all of those adults that are income will be these household member tabs. They are all identical, but they are just set for the different households. So you can have up to 15 household members. If you need more than that, just let us know. I don't think we've run into that yet, but just give us a shout. We can help you with that. But these tabs are, again, going to give you different sections to fill out based on the type of income that that specific household member has. high level overview. Section 1 is for our wage and salary earners. So this is going to be kind of your classic wage or salaried person that may be working an 8 to 5. So that's going to be your first section. There's 2 employer sections in case they have 2 different employers. If they have more than 2, let us know and we'll help you figure that out. The next section is seasonal income. So this is seasonal for our purposes. There's those that aren't working year round. So think of the paraeducator that may not work in the summers. Or a good example, our lifeguards only work in the summers, so they don't work the remainder of the year. That's going to be the seasonal income section. Section 3 is going to be your self-employment income. So any sort of personal business or rentals, if they have rental properties, this will be used for that as well. And then the last section of income, this is going to be Social Security, child support, pensions, any other types of periodic IRAs could go into this as well. Those sorts of payments that are on a periodic basis would go down here. Again, I know that's a crazy high level overview of the workbook, but definitely check out that income calculate, give that a read, and then let us know if you have any specific questions regarding income, and we would be happy to help with that. All right. The next document on our documentation checklist is scoring documentation. So again, this is one where I'm not going to go through every single scoring commitment because that would take a very long time. And I want to make sure we get done in a decent time frame. I know this is already going to be almost 3 hours, so I don't want to keep you too long. So the scoring documentation for all those scoring commitments that you made, we do have a scoring commitment user website that goes through each scoring commitment and the required documentation that needs to be uploaded for each disbursement request that meets that commitment. I'm going to open it just briefly so you at least see the front of it and know what it would look like. And I'll show you on the website here in a few minutes where to locate this document. But the Sponsor's Guide to Documenting Scoring Commitments, all the scoring commitments are in alphabetical order. You can search this document. So if you click Control F and type in what you're looking for, you can search and go exactly where you need to go so that you don't have to read through every single thing or scroll through the entire thing if you don't want to do that. But this document is going to give you an overview of what was awarded for a specific commitment, why the points were awarded, and then what your specific documentation options are in a bulleted list. Again, if you are looking through this and you have any specific questions regarding any of the scoring, I'm happy to talk details with you on your project. I will note that this guide currently does not include the new scoring commitments that were added in 2025. We're working on getting those uploaded and hope to have that up by the end of the month. The only scoring commitments I believe that are missing because of that right now are the climate resiliency, the district distribution, and the rural households commitments. The rural households and district distribution commitments, I don't believe will require any upload to the system because those are based on the county, and we can verify the county of the property off of other documentation you're already uploading. So the main one that is going to end up in this guide is that climate resiliency commitment. If you did do the climate resiliency commitment, the most likely options that we're going to throw in here for rehabilitation projects, you are most likely going to be uploading the invoice or estimate that you're already going to be providing else because we need the estimate to be able to verify what to reimburse you. But you're probably going to be uploading that estimate or invoice again that shows the scope of work that meets the specific climate resiliency commitment that you are trying to select in the disbursement request. So again, we are hoping to get that up in the next few weeks. I apologize for the delay, but that is the one main commitment that's missing. Otherwise, you should be able to find the remaining commitments in the guide that is currently posted. Okay. Next document in our list is our disbursement feasibility workbook. The disbursement feasibility workbook is where we're going to kind of sum up all of your costs on the project, and it helps kind of figure out how much AHP subsidy you need, things of that form. The feasibility workbook is on our public website. Again, all these documents are on our public website, and I'll show you here in a few it's where things located. But the one note I do want to make, and I will make again here in a little bit, is that there are feasibility workbooks for each specific project year. So we, of course, award a different AHP group every single year. So there is a workbook on the website. It was just posted this week that is labeled 2025 Projects Disbursement Feasibility Workbook. You want to make sure as a 2025 project that you are always 2025 projects feasibility workbook. If you use the 24 or 2023, the system is not going to let you upload it in AHP Online. It will give you an error and tell you that it's the wrong funding year. So you want to make sure to always grab 25. Even once we introduce a new 2026 workbook, you will always grab the 2025 projects workbook for your 2025 project. So for this one, I'm going to go through an actual example of how to fill out the feasibility workbook, just because I know you'll be filling out a lot of these, and do a quick example real quick. So let's open one up here. All right, let me make this a little bigger. There we go. All right, when you first open the feasibility workbook, it's going to take you to the Start Here tab. You will have to select the type of project that you are. So for you are all going to be rehab projects every single time. So you will select rehab every time. Once you select rehab, you'll go to tab, and you'll see that it has unlocked and is now available to fill out. All the other tabs will be blacked out, so you won't be able to accidentally fill out the wrong one. So this is the rehabilitation tab. Again, I know there's a lot going on, but I promise it's simpler than it looks. So the first thing you just need to enter is the name. So I'm just going to put in our test name here, and then we'll say we're 25. 40 is our project number. If you're not sure what your project number is, it is in your AHP agreement. It is also in AHP Online. Eventually, I know you'll have that number memorized, and you'll be typing it in no problem. But when you're first looking for it, AHP agreement or AHP Online, once that system goes up here in the next week or two, and you'll be able to find that number. The next thing that you're going to do is select the targeting breakdown. So really all this is you're going to put a 1 in the box that corresponds to the AMI category that the household falls into. So you'll have to have done your household calculation, your income calculation, to be able to determine this. We'll say that our household is below 50% AMI for this request. And so all we're going to do is just put a 1 in unit at this category. So you will always enter a 1. It'll just be whichever income category they fall into. All right. The remaining sections are broken into 2 pieces. You have the sources of funds section and the uses of funds section. So sources of funds are going to be, of course, the money that's utilized to pay all the expenses, AHP funds. And then your uses of funds are going to be all of those expenses from the contractor, from your inspection fee, your sponsor fee, all of those things. You can fill out the sources of funds first, then fill out uses, vice versa. I like to fill out the uses of funds first, so that I know how all of my costs add up. And then I will go to my sources of funds and fill out how I'm covering those expenses. Again, you don't have to do it that way, but it's just the way I like to do it for the purposes of training. So I'm going to start with our uses of funds for this example. It's a little bigger. Apologize. I know this gets really small. All right. So we'll start with our uses of funds. So this is where I'll list all our expenses. So the first set of expenses we need to list are the expenses related to the direct rehabilitation. So these are things, the contractor expenses. So there was a roof replacement done. That would go in. When you are writing your rehabilitation description, we do not need all the details of what was done in the feasibility workbook. We do need to estimate, talk about that in a little bit, but in the feasibility workbook, we just need either a short synopsis of the work done, something like roof replacement, and that's it. Or you can put in the name of the contractor here if you want to just make it simple in that form. The big thing that we're looking for here is that us as reviewers at the Federal Home Loan Bank can tie whatever piece of information you put in here and the cost to the invoice or estimate that you provide to us. So together, that's what we're looking for. So we're just going to use the contractor name for this example today. So I'm going to say that ABC contractor came in and they did, let's say, $15,000 of work for us. Now, when we're talking about this $15,000 total, that's the amount that's on my invoice, we'll say. There are two columns that you can put the costs into. There's costs paid by the AHP funds and costs paid by other sources of funds. So if all of the cost, if the full $15,000 is made by AHP, if a portion of it's being paid by a different source, then we want to put that in our other sources column. So I'm going to say for this one that 14,500 was paid by AHP and 500 was paid by some other source of funds. Now, the key significance of the 500 that I've just entered, some of you might recognize, that financial participation scoring commitment. If you have the member financial participation scoring commitment, one of the things for meeting that commitment is that the member provides a $500 donation to up to 20 or to at least 20% of the households in your project. So what you can see I'm suggesting here is that we're going to be using member financial participation and saying that our member provided a $500 donation. Again, we'll say here in a few minutes up above what that specific donation was, but right now we're just writing out our costs and if they were paid by AHP or somebody else in general. Okay, so we're going to say ABC contractor did that, and then we're going to say that there was some additional work. We'll say $2,000 in work, and let's say for the sake of an example that you as the sponsor organization completed the rehabilitation work is fine. You do not have to hire a third-party contractor if you do some work internally. You can do a combination if you want to hire a third party and then do some of the work yourself. That's fine. So I'm going to just write into here that we're going to do sponsor. Since you guys as the sponsor, I'm just writing sponsor because I'm just using a generic name here, but you can put your organization name in since you are the contractor for that job, that specific cost. And then you will put the expenses paid. So we'll say this one, we incurred $2,000 and it was all paid for with AHP funds. All right. So once you've entered all of the rehabilitation work, you can keep going if you have additional contractors or additional work completed. You're then going to see this rehabilitation work subtotal. So this $16,500. This is going to be important when we talk about our sponsor fee. Talking about the 10% or $1,000 max, you can take 10% of this 16,500 here, which we will do in just a moment. But this is going to be the sum right now of rehabilitation work paid for with AHP funds. This has to be at least $3,500. This is that guideline we were talking about earlier. You can see if you're not hitting the $3,500 right now, I'm hitting 2,000. It's going to minimum rehab amount must be at least 3,500 paid with AHP. So make sure that you're watching that guideline. We are meeting that now based on the original figures I entered is fine. We have 500 paid by another source for a total of 17,000 off of all of our estimates or invoices. The remaining lines are all of our fees. So again, we do require that a third-party inspection be completed on each home. We will cover the inspection fee with AHP funds for the inspection that has completed. We do not have a cap on the maximum amount that can be charged for the inspection. We want to make we're covering inspections since that is something that we require for our program. If you get them done for free, that's wonderful. You don't have to charge a fee here, but you'll just enter one here if you do have an inspection fee that's charged by your inspector. We'll say for this one that we're going to have a $100 inspection. Okay. So then once we've got that, we then have our sponsor fee. So again, the sponsor fee is the greater of 10% of the rehab work or $1,000, whichever is greater. So the 10%, if we look at our 16,500, if we take 10% of that number, that is $1,650. So $1,650 is greater than $1,000 So we are up to 1,650. You'll notice that if I try to enter anything above that, it will throw an error. So it will catch you if you are trying to charge a fee that's over guidelines. But if I put in my exact 10%, it's going to get rid of that error there. You do not have to charge the maximum amount. That's just the maximum that exists. If you want to charge that much, you can charge just 1,000, you can charge 500. As long as it doesn't exceed the maximum of those two numbers, that is fine. We're not judging either direction. We understand it's expensive to run your programs. So if you're putting in the maximum amount, we understand. So there's no judgment on our end. We just set a maximum and leave it up to you to decide what you would like that fee to be per project. All right. The home ownership counseling fee. Again, this is only for ownership counseling scoring commitment. If the household does take the class, then you are allowed to charge up to that $500 fee. This is where you'll indicate to us that you would like to charge that fee to help cover the expenses of the class. We're going to say for this one that we don't have that commitment specifically. But if you do, this is where you would enter that fee to let us know that you're charging that amount for the homeownership counseling. The last line is other fees. This is generally not used a whole lot, but we'll leave it here just in case. The main thing that I've seen put in this other fees line is if, say that the contractor had you as the sponsor purchase a permit. Oop. Having some fun technical issues there. All right. If you are, as a sponsor, are buying like the construction permit for the job on behalf of the contractor or something like that, sometimes in here. But other than that, we don't see a whole lot there. But if you have an other fee that needs to be charged that's rehabilitation related, this is where that would go, with the amount going accordingly in the AHP or other sources column. Oh boy, sorry, I just totally lost all my numbers. Here, I'm going to pull, I have one already filled out, so we'll utilize it here. Cheat a little bit. I apologize. Okay. So this is what it would have looked like if I did not have that lovely technical glitch. So this is where we are at with uses of funds. So again, we went through all of our fees. Once we've finished entering all of our costs, you'll see a couple numbers here at the bottom. We've got this total uses line, the cost paid by AHD. This is going to be the amount of AHP funds that you need to cover your expenses. Then, of course, to the right is going to be other sources. So we need at least $500 in other funding sources to cover our expenses for a total of the $18,750 that is on the far right. You'll see that this green right now, it usually would be red if I was working on the same workbook as I was a minute ago. But the reason it's green is because I've already entered all my, so you'll see there's some checks going on in the feasibility workbook to make sure that you're entering the information and that the numbers are all matching up. You've got enough money in uses to cover, or excuse me, in sources to cover all of your uses, and vice versa. So just keep that in mind. You want to make sure everything's green at the end of the day. But that is the uses of funds section. So after this, we'll go to the sources of funds section and talk about how to cover all of those expenses. So for this one, you can see, again, I've already filled out this workbook, but the AHP subsidy amount we need to cover our expenses is that $18,250. That is pulled directly from the cost paid by AHP column down below. So if you fill out your uses first, it'll do the math for you. If you already know what the amount is, and then want to go backwards and fill it out the other way, that's totally fine. But I know that it's the $18,250 based on my column down below. And then I also know that I need to have $500 in other sources of funds to cover the remaining expenses. So I said that I was going to use member financial participation. So my member bank is going to provide a $500 donation to this job to help cover the costs. That is what this $500 is down here. So I've plugged that in here. If you have any other source of funds, such as a loan or other grant program that fits in to one of these applicable. If you do have a loan, you need to put the rate and the term of that loan in here as well. We will ask for documentation to verify the other sources of funds that are utilized for the rehabilitation work. So we'll be looking for documentation for member financial participation. Again, that's covered in the scoring commitments guide. And we will check that documentation. If you have a loan, we're going to be looking for loan documentation to verify the amount, the rate, and if the owner, the homeowner, provides their own funds to help cover the rehabilitation expense, you'll enter that here, and documentation is not required for homeowner contributions specifically if they are providing their own funds. Okay, I got a question in the chat. Are we supposed to subtract other sources of funds from the con? I'm a little uncertain on that question. So it's subtracted from the amount paid by AHP, but the total amount from the contractor, we want to know what the total is on the invoice as a whole, including any other sources of funds. Does that help answer that question? Respond here. Any other questions that people have you want to enter into the Q&A right now about the feasibility workbook? That is kind of the general gist there. Okay. All right. Well, we will go ahead and move towards the next work. Yes, we'll cover that question later for the one about the $500. We got a question about the rehabilitation work not covered with AHP funds. So regarding work that you want to include in the feasibility workbook, we only want to see work is either fully or partially paid for with AHP funds. We don't see any work that is not paid for with AHP funds at all. So if you are doing a roof replacement and a bathroom remodel and the AHP funds are going to cover the roof replacement, then and there's a totally different source of funds that's fully covering the bathroom remodel, we do not need to see that's a slight change. We made that change last year for our existing sponsors that are familiar with that. So we only need to see the work that is either fully or partially paid for with AHP funds. Okay. All right. Good questions. Thank you for your questions. The feasibility workbook, the next thing we're going to cover is the final cost certification. So the final cost certification template is on our public website. I'm going to put a fresh copy here. All right. So this is the final cost certification. In some form, it's kind of similar to the feasibility workbook of our expenses, but this is really where everybody's signing off that everything has been completed. So this document gets completed at the very end. So once all the rehabilitation work is done, you'll fill out this document with all the final expenses, and then you will get everybody's signatures as applicable. So the main thing I want to cover first is this sponsor certification section and all the information that needs. So the information here, and I should actually, let me pull my feasibility workbook back up. Use our feasibility workbook to fill out the final cost certification here. They kind of go hand in hand a little bit. Okay, we'll try to get these side by side. I apologize if they end up really small. Okay. So Okay, talking about how to fill out this section in the middle here of the final cost certification. The first thing that you have to fill out is the rehabilitation completion date. So the rehabilitation completion date we talked about a little bit earlier when we were talking about deadlines. So your disbursement has to be submitted within 60 days, 90 days, excuse me, 90 days of the rehabilitation completion date. So this is the date that the last contractor steps foot off the property and is done with work. So we're going to say, for the sake of our example today, that rehabilitation work done on January 1st of this year. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to start listing our expenses. So the first section is saying, I certify this amount was incurred by an unrelated third party. So your third party contractors that are completing rehabilitation work. So you'll list the contractor name here and the amount that they charged over off to the right. And this is the full amount charged. So we're talking about the full 15,000 on this one. So in our example, we said that ABC contractor charged $15,000 for the job that they did. So they did a $15,000, we'll say, roof replacement for the sake of our example. Even though $500 of that 15,000 was covered by another source of funds, we are just putting the total amounts in the final cost certification. So we're going to list our contractor name. We've got ABC contractor, and we paid them $15,000 to do that roof replacement. So again, we differentiated between the two different feasibility workbook. Here, we're just listing our total costs for everything. All right. The next section is going to ask us to list the amounts incurred by the sponsor. Now, again, we recognize that since this is a reimbursement program, you as the sponsor are incurring the costs in some form regardless. Even the costs by ABC contractor, you're paying ABC contractor ahead of the time and admitting to us for reimbursement. That's not what we're referring to in this section. This section would be specifically when we're talking about rehabilitation costs. This is going to be rehabilitation costs for construction work, actual construction work that was completed by the sponsor acting as the contractor. So in our example, we said that the sponsor acting as the contractor did rehabilitation work. So that $2,000 is going to go here because the sponsor was the contractor for that specific. Then the remaining fees on here are going to exactly line up with our feasibility workbook. I apologize again for all the back and forth here. It's listed in the generally the same order. We've got our third-party inspection fee, sponsor fee. Developer fees, again, are not allowed, but we used to allow a fee a couple years back. Got some old projects that have been grandfathered in, so that's why it's still listed on this form. But you will not utilize the developer fee line. We have our homeownership counseling fee, and then we have a line if you have other fees to be able to add those. So we're going to go ahead and add our remaining fees. Again, they were in the same order here. We got 100 for our inspection, $16.50 for our sponsor fee, and then we did not have any other remaining fees. Okay. The whole goal at the end of this is that the amount in total down here, if you're using our PDF form, you will see that it automatically totals for you at the bottom to the 18,750. We want that to match the total in the bottom right hand. Those two numbers should match at the end of the day. If they do, that's great, and you should be good to move forward. All right, got a question about rounding down. This is a good question. Asking, do we also need to round down to the nearest dollar on this form? So both feasibility workbook and FCC will address both here. You can go either direction. I know that's not a direct answer, I suppose. The biggest thing is that in the system, I believe feasibility workbook, I'm we tested it recently and we may have gotten a fix in that avoids this. But the feasibility system is going to look at this number here and wants to make sure that it's matching the amount of reimbursement that you're requesting in AHP Online. So if you leave the change on here, it may cause some issues in AHP Online when you try the workbook. So a lot of people find it easiest to go ahead and round down your numbers in this feasibility workbook and the FCC. But if you leave the change on the we're not going to penalize you or anything for that. That's totally fine as well, as long as the amount you're requesting for us matches what you've put in your feasibility workbook. Good question. All right. Any other questions people have right now about either of these two forms or input questions, if you have any at the moment about the forms? The remaining information on the final cost certification, I'm going to make this big again. So that is kind of the bulk information that you have to enter on here. The remaining information is all signatures. So your signature at the top of the page, I should also say you put in your project number, homeowner name, property address as well. So general information at the top. But then your homeowner is going to sign this document. They are is that all rehab has been completed to their satisfaction. So they're pretty much signing off and saying, looks good to me, and it's kind of releasing liability from that front. The signature can be either digital or wet signature. So if you have people that prefer to sign with a pen, that's great. If they prefer to sign digitally and e-sign this document, it is set up to be e-signed. So you can email this and it does function that someone to provide their e-signature. So that is an acceptable alternative to having this wet signed. Same thing for the other signatures down below. Someone from the sponsor organization needs to sign this document. So they'll put their signature, printed name, and date here. And then the last section is our contractor and signature. Now, there is a little bit of a caveat to this section. The reason that we have the contractors sign or what we call proof of payment, which is one of the other required documents in the slides that we're covering today. Proof of payment, one of those options again, is for the contractor to sign this document. If your contractor signs this document, they are signing off saying that they have completed the work above and that the amount listed on this estimate, or sorry, on this FCC is the amount they've been paid out. So they're verifying I've received full payment, complete signing. That is one way to provide proof of payment to us that your contractor has been paid so that we know we're reimbursing costs. There are a few other alternative options, and I will cover those alternatives here in a little bit. But this is one of those options and tends to be one of the easier options for a lot of our projects. So we tend to recommend this, but again, that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with using the alternative options if one of those other options, which I'll cover in a minute, works better for you. Same thing with the inspector. There's a couple other ways that the inspector can sign off they've been paid. If they don't charge a fee, then they don't have to sign this document, of course. But if they sign this document, that's one way to provide proof of payment for the inspector, and we'll cover a couple other options regarding how they can verify proof of payment otherwise. Okay, so that is the final cost certification. I don't see any further questions right now, but feel free to put any in if you think of any along the way. I'm going to close these out here. I guess I should close this out too so we can upload it later. All right. So we've worked through our first four here. We've made it through the final cost certification. The next thing is our third-party inspection and inspector credentials. So your third-party inspector, you can use multiple different inspectors if you want. You can use a single one for all your jobs, whatever you prefer. For your inspector, you'd be required to provide inspector credentials verifying that they are able to complete an inspection and are knowledgeable on the subject matter that they are inspecting. Now, we are somewhat lenient about what could be considered an inspector. It does not have to be a state certified inspector necessarily. You can use states their credentials. When you're providing credentials to us, you can provide their inspection license, and that will cover them completely. So that is good for inspector credentials. If you want to use an alternative individual for as an inspector, we need to have documentation verifying that they are able to inspect the work and have the background knowledge or expertise, I should say, to be able to inspect the work. So a lot of times what we see is that maybe we find individuals who either were previously or are currently contractors that are unrelated to the work that was completed. So it can't be the contractor that completed the work, of course. It would have to be a third party completely to all work completed, and the sponsor organization have to be completely unrelated to all those organizations that could come in and inspect the work and make sure it was done correctly. So sometimes we'll see former contractors or current contractors that are unrelated to the work completed. That's probably the most common one. For them, for inspector credentials, we're looking for something to the extent of like a resume or something similar that outlines their work experience and their credentials regarding how they have performed work or have the expertise necessary to complete an inspection of the work that was completed. So if you have any questions about a specific individual you'd like to utilize, and if the documentation you have for inspector credentials is acceptable, please don't hesitate to reach out to your analyst and they would be happy to help you figure that out. All right. In terms of the inspection, we do have a third-party inspection form available on our website. I'm going to go ahead and pull open that form now. I will say that you are not required to use this form. It is an option. A lot of people find it convenient. It's pretty short and sweet. But if you have an inspector that has they like to use, that is okay, as long as the inspection report or form that they provide shows that the inspection passed and has some way for us to tie it back to the household, whether that's the property address, the homeowner's name, something like that, so that we know that it is specifically tied to that property. For those that would like to use our inspection form, this is what that looks like. The top section here is just basic homeowner information, property address, all of that good stuff. Then the next section, again, all this will be filled out by your inspector from here on out. They'll put their printed name, their company name, their printed name again, and their signature. Again, they can e-sign or they can wet sign. Either way is totally acceptable to us. So they are signing off that they have evaluated all the work completed. And then they can list any fees here. So if they had a cost to the inspection, a charge fee for the inspection, they can list that here. This is another form of proof of payment for our inspectors. So inspector checks the paid in full box, puts a date and a check number if applicable, and they have signed this document, then this counts as proof of payment for the inspector. So they don't have to sign the final cost certification as well. They can't. If you just want everybody to sign everything, that's fine. Doesn't hurt anything. But this would count as another alternative option for proof of payment for the inspector specifically. All right. That is third-party inspection. Again, a third-party inspection is required on all jobs, and we will cover the expense for any inspection that is completed. Okay. All right. Estimates and invoices. I'm actually going to use some slides to talk about this because estimates or private homeowner information, things like that. So we're just going to talk about estimates and invoices in general here. Had somebody ask if a second inspection is needed, is it covered as well? Yes. If you have to have somebody come back, say the inspector comes in the first time and says, you need to correct X and Y and Z, and the contractor has to come back in and fix that, yes, you can we can help you cover the inspection fee for the secondary inspection after those corrections are made. Okay. Estimates and invoices. Again, going to talk about these kind of in general since I don't have any specific estimates to pull up, but I think a lot of us or all of us have seen an estimate of some form, whether that's on a personal or professional front. So estimate or invoice, we only need the estimate or invoice that has the the final scope of work. So, sometimes I know you'll get the estimate, you'll have the work done, and then you'll get to a final invoice. We do not need both. We just need one of those documents as long as it has the final price and the final scope of work. That's what we're looking for. Helps us tie it back to the feasibility workbook so that we can make sure we're reimbursing for the correct amount. So you do not have to provide both, just one or the other that has those pieces of information. The rehabilitation expense, and we've covered mine, but nonetheless like to reinforce it. Rehabilitation expenses paid with AHP subsidy must be a minimum of $3,500 per unit. That excludes all fees. That is just direct rehabilitation expenses, and the feasibility workbook will make sure that you're hitting that minimum. The contractor estimate or invoice must also include the following two items. It needs a statement that valid the rehabilitation being completed. There is an example of this statement on the AHP website. I'll show you where that is if you'd like to copy and paste it or your contractors can copy and paste it to their estimates so it saves them a little time trying to phrase it. But in essence, what we're trying to verify with this piece of information is that the home is still livable when this work is completed. So we don't want to complete work on any homes that are not in a state that somebody is going to be able to live in it. So if somebody's not living in the home, you're going to complete work and the home is still not going to be at a point where they move it. That unfortunately is work that we cannot do. So this statement is pretty much just validating that concerning at least the scope of work that's being completed by the contractor, it isn't going to render the house unusable or anything of that form, and that somebody is still going to be able to live in it in regards to that specific scope of work. Again, there's a specific statement and to save everybody time so you don't have to worry about it too much. If it's phrased slightly different on a contractor estimate, we're not necessarily looking exactly word for word if they have to get it in there, but just something to that extent. So I will show you where that statement is here in a minute. The other thing that the contractor estimate or invoice needs to include is signatures from the homeowner and the contractor. So the homeowner and contractor both need to sign document, sign, or they can wet sign either direction, whichever is easier for you all. Okay. The last note on this slide is about cost reasonableness. So I mentioned this briefly earlier when we were talking about project cost guidelines and said I'd cover it later. This is that point in time. So cost reasonableness, for our purposes, we're going to make sure during our review that the costs you were charged for the work that was completed are generally reasonable for the area that you are in, that you're not getting gypped in essence. There are two ways we can establish cost reasonableness. One of those ways is if you provide a competing bid to us. This is a relatively new option, so we just presented this a few months ago for those that have previous project. They may be familiar with this this alternative we've provided. If you provide a competing bid to us that has the following three used to establish cost reasonableness. So those three items are that competing bid needs to come from a third-party entity. It cannot come from the sponsor agency, come from a third-party contractor. It needs to have a comparable scope of work to the bid that was actually selected. So we need to be able to kind of give a one-for-one comparison. We don't want it to be a complete change in scope of work because then we can't compare the prices. And then, of course, the competing bid that you provide, we want to see has a higher price than the one that was actually selected for to complete the work. So you only have to provide one competing bid. I don't need to see all the bids that you obtained. I know sometimes you may obtain three bids and then you choose the price that's in the middle for one or another. You don't need to provide to us the bid that was lower. We just need to see at least one bid that was higher than the amount that you ended up paying to the contractor that won that. So again, though, if there are multiple contractors that are involved in the work, so you're bringing in someone to do a roof replacement and someone to do a bathroom remodel, we need to have comparable bids work. If we don't have it for all scopes of work, then we'll have to complete an internal review regardless, which is not a punitive measure by any stretch, just an alternative way for us to establish cost reasonableness. But if you want to use that alternative of providing a competing bid, we do need competing bids for all scopes related to the household. So the alternative to this is that we will complete a review of the cost reasonableness using our cost estimating software internally. Again, not a punitive measure by any stretch that we're doing this. We just provide the competing bid alternative because it tends to be a faster way for us to get your money back out the door. We know that our cost reasonableness reviews take a little bit of extra time on top of our regular disbursement review. So we, for those that would like to expedite that review a little bit, but it is not required by any stretch. You are not required to get any competing bids. You can just get singular bid if that's all you're able to get. I know that in some communities, they're very restricted on the number of contractors that are available. So just keep in mind the competing bid option is optional. It is not required, just optional to help kind of bypass our internal review. If we, what we will do inside of the bank is we will use our cost estimating software. It's called CostWorks if you're familiar, or RS Means if you're familiar with cost estimating softwares at all. We use our cost estimating software. We take the scope of work from the estimate or invoice that you've provided to us. We run it through our cost estimating software to make sure that you guys are generally in the ballpark of what we'd expect to see. We do have a leniency on it. We're not going to say we came up with this number and it must be this number. We've got percentage variances to accounts that we just can't account for being so far away and not actually having seen the specific job that was done. It's very rare that we run into circumstances where we're not coming in reasonable, but we may ask questions during our review just to get us a better idea and to make sure that we are estimating the job accurately. So if you get questions, that's concerning. The big thing that we ask quantities and units of measure for the specific materials that were used for the job. So for example, we'll say we do a roof replacement. It's really hard for us to estimate a roof replacement if we don't know how big the roof is. So a 20 square roof is going to be very different from a 12 square roof. So we want to know the squares like that, the linear feet of drip edge. I don't need to know how many screws you put into the decking or any fasteners and things like that. We don't need to go to that level of detail. But when you're thinking about the main materials, if you were to send somebody to Menards to get the materials, the main materials for a job, think of what you would have to tell them to be able to get the right amount of materials to do the job. So just keep that in mind for our review purposes. If we're not provided those with the initial review, we may follow up to get those quantities. So if you get those questions, that is why. Okay. The last few things before we start hopping into the public website, things of that form. The first thing is the eligible and ineligible rehabilitation expense. While we're testaments and invoices, we'll talk about what is eligible and what is not eligible. Generally, I'm actually going to talk about what's not eligible because I think that's actually faster than talking about what is eligible because there's so many things that are eligible, all the way from electrical to sewer to foundation work, windows, doors, flooring, painting, siding, so many things that are eligible. But the main things I do want to cover are those things that are not eligible. The first thing is any sort of luxury items, hot tubs, swimming pools. Believe it or not, we saw one once. So please don't do that. The hot tubs and swimming pools are not something we can help cover. Same thing with landscaping. This does a few caveats to it. When we're talking about landscaping, we don't want to do any sort of landscaping that's just kind of for looks, things like flower beds, things of that form. But we can do things like retaining walls. Retaining walls are going to help prevent water from coming into the home. So that is something that's preventative to make sure that we're providing for the safety of the home. Same thing with things like branches or tree trimming or even removal of trees. We don't want to do it for just specifically aesthetic purposes. But if the tree is hanging over the roof or is sitting on top of the roof and is preventing you from doing a roof replacement or something like that, then of course we can help cover expenses for trimming that tree back or taking off limbs, things like that that are necessary. So there's a tree that's endangering the home that is imminent danger of falling on the home. We, of course, don't want that to happen. So we can help cover costs for removing trees that may be in imminent danger to the home itself. The other thing to consider with landscaping is our things like sidewalks, driveways, patios, decks, things of that form. We again don't want to just do it for aesthetic purposes, things like that, but if there's an accessibility issue to the home, if it is preventing someone properly being able to egress in and out of their home, then of course we want we can help cover fences regarding an accessibility problem. So the big thing with any sort of landscaping, it's either something that is helping prevent or is helping restore an issue that is causing damage to the home. So if it's causing damage to the home or an issue, those are generally the things that we can cover when it comes to outdoor expenses or landscaping. So keep that in mind. If we do ask questions, if your contractor doesn't explicitly state why it's being done, we may ask questions during our review of why certain work is being completed to ensure it meets one of those two categories. Couple other things that are ineligible, construction buildings, so sheds or barns or other outbuildings. The detached garages are okay. So we will accept work on a detached garage, but we will not on a shed or other outbuilding, a storage facility, something like that that's sitting on the property. Then the last thing I want to cover specifically is yard work and cleaning expenses. So any sort of cleanup in the yard or just general, we generally won't cover. Now, we understand that your contractor may charge a small fee for cleanup of the work that they do specifically. So they come in and do a roof replacement. They may charge a small cleanup fee to clean up all the nails and stuff that have fallen all over the yard and things of that form. That's okay. But what we're talking about here with cleaning expenses is things like if you have a homeowner that may have a lot of clutter in there, pay for expenses specifically to just clear out clutter in the home or to deal with any hoarding situations, things like that. Those are unfortunately things that we can't cover. So that's what it's talking about with cleaning expenses. Same thing with the yard work. If you're just cleaning up the yard, things like that, those are unfortunately expenses that we cannot cover. So the main thing to think about when you're looking at eligible or ineligible is if the work is being done on the home itself, it is generally eligible. There are very things that's done to the home itself that would not be eligible. And then in terms of things external to the home, you'll want to make sure that it is either remedying a accessibility issue or is remedying an issue that is causing damage to the home or is causing imminent danger to the home. Okay, if you have any specific questions, again, specific scenarios you want to run past us, please reach out prior to completing the rehabilitation work so you don't spend money on things we can't. We would be happy to have that discussion with you and approve things ahead of time if you are unsure if they are eligible or ineligible. All right. Proof of payment. This is going to be the last document that was in our documentation checklist. Sorry, I got one question about scope of work. A whole house general. It could potentially be, assuming that they don't have another electricity source, things like that. But is something we can definitely talk about on the side, on a side conversation in terms of the specific situation that you're coming into with that one. So feel free to reach out to us about that, and we'll have a specific conversation about that hold and size. But that is something that could potentially qualify, yes. All right, proof of payment. This is the last document on the checklist. So we're getting to the end of the documentation here. So proof of payment, we've talked about a little bit already. We do need proof of payment showing that the contractor and the inspector have been paid as applicable. The final cost certification we talked about is the probably first line option for providing proof of payment. If your contractor or inspector is proof of payment, and nothing further needs to be provided. If you are unable to uh, if you do not have signatures on the final cost certification, the alternative options are also listed on the screen. You can provide an invoice to us that is marked paid and has been initialed or signed by the contractor, an invoice showing a $0 balance, again, initialed or signed by the contractor, and then a cash check. You can provide a copy of the cash check on front and back for the amount of the invoice. So as long as we can tie that check to the invoice specifically, or that has the name of the homeowner or the property address on the check so that we can attach that back to the specific property at hand. So those are some alternative options if they do not sign the final cost certification. Again, a lot of people do find it easiest to just have their contractor or inspector provide their signature, again, e-signature or wet signature on the FCC to verify proof of payment. All right. Okay. So the last thing I want to talk about documentation wise is not actually on the documentation checklist, and there's a reason for that. So ownership documentation. We do not require that you provide ownership documentation to us for each of the households, but you do have to verify that the household or the homeowner actually does own the home, because you will be certifying the statements that you see on the screen, those two kind of in the middle with the yes or no checkbox. Those statements are two of the certifications that you'll have to certify in each disbursement request. And you're certifying that there are no non-occupying co-borrowers or co-owners, and that the deed verifies the applicant's ownership of the property. So by nature, collecting ownership documentation and verifying that the homeowner does retain ownership and does not have non-occupying co-owners. If available, we do recommend reviewing the property record card on the county assessor's website. That is a lot of times where we end up in some form accidentally finding that there are co-owners. We sometimes will pull property record cards. We don't pull it to check ownership most of the time. We may be pulling it to verify the large unit commitment, or to help with our cost reasonableness review or something like that. We'll pull it for some other reason, then find out that there is a non-occupying co-owner on the property. So we may send questions about that. So if you want to get ahead of the game of what we may be looking at, we definitely recommend checking out those property record cards if you do have one available to you. Okay. The other trust. This is the one circumstance where we will require that you provide the actual ownership documentation, because we can't verify who the owners are without an actual copy of the trust. So we need a copy of the full trust to be provided to us during the disbursement review if it is in a trust. You can upload that as a miscellaneous document on the project and disbursement where that is. And the way that we verify that they do actually own the home is that the homeowner must be both the grantor and the first beneficiary on the trust. Some trusts will use different language for that. So if you are not certain if the trust is acceptable, feel free to send us a copy via email, and we'd be happy to review that before you complete any rehabilitation work to verify that it meets our standards regarding ownership. All right. Okay. So this is going to be the last of my slides before we pop out onto the website and start looking at things online. What this slide is it's a list of the resources that you'll find under each section of the public website. I'm going to actually show you the public website and what these different sections are and what all these documents are or where they're located. But nonetheless, for a summary for your reference later, This slide lists the different sections of our website and what forms or user guides, things like that can be found under each section. So I'm going to go into the actual website, but feel free to grab this later. Okay. A question about what documentation is acceptable as proof on a fixture. I'm a little uncertain. Sorry, I apologize. I may not know the reference behind that one to help answer that question. I can have a conversation on the back end about that one. I'm uncertain what that refers to on that question. So we'll have a conversation on the back. Okay. Public website. So the Affordable Housing Program website, if you're unfamiliar with this, I definitely go ahead and bookmark this on your personal computer. You'll be referencing this website a lot. It has all of our forms, things like that on it. So definitely grab this. Okay. So the different sections that are referenced in terms of what you would click on to find the different documents like that are these tabs on the left. So you'll see in my slide it says disbursement and then lists different forms. You can use these tabs right here to go to the specific section you're looking for. So the general website, again, I'm just going to give a general overview and then we're going to go into AHP Online here in a minute and look at a disbursement request. So this first section here is just general information about the program as a whole. Typical users, our awardees from the past 10 years are listed here if you're just curious and would like to see our past year's awardees. Then we go into the application section. You all have had successful applications. So you are past the application portion, but if you do want to apply in a future year, including we have another round coming up here in July of 2026, you can refer to this section here. We'll be publishing information as we get closer to 6 AHP round. Then we get to the disbursement section. The section has a little synopsis right here, but the main thing you'll want to do for these resources is to go ahead and click this owner occupied button right here. And it will take you into some additional resources regarding the owner occupied disbursements. So the first resource on here is going to be the disbursement use guide. So this document goes step by step how to submit a disbursement request in AHP Online. So definitely grab this. We're going to go through those steps today. They're also in my slides. But if you would like the user guide, it is a great resource as well when you are working through disbursement requests in AHP Online. So feel free to grab that. The other thing in this section is that documentation checklist in my slides, but it's also pulled directly from here. So you can find that list here. You'll want to make sure that you're referring to anything that has a rehab projects label next to it or no label at all. So if you're looking at income calculation workbook, that's applicable to all projects. In essence, you just want to ignore the ones that say purchase projects. That's for our down payment assistance projects. The other thing that's in this list, and it's kind of hiding, is the home structure statement. So this highlighted statement right here is that statement regarding making sure the home is structurally sound, excuse me, that I was talking about earlier, that must be on all estimates or invoices that are submitted to us. You are welcome to copy and paste this statement from here or use something generally similar. But if you do just want to copy and paste statement, that is where it is located. The remaining information on this portion of the website is about extensions as well as deadline that we covered earlier when talking about the implementation plan. I'll skip that for now, but you can find that information again here. Okay, so that is the disbursement section. I'm going to hop back down. This is where we just were. Then we can go to the monitoring section. So the monitoring, the first thing on here is the user guides for semi-annual progress reports. So that one, you'll be able to, you can download the user guide. So you'll click the owner occupied button right here and be able to download the user guide for submitting your semi-annual progress report once you receive notification that you need to submit one. Again, your first one will be in July. So you've got a report, but this user guide attached right here will help you walk through that process when it comes to that. The next section is on project completion reporting. Again, your project completion report isn't due until the project is done. So you will not use this guide until later, but once you are ready for project completion reporting, there's a user guide and some additional information under this owner occupied button right here when you're ready for that. All right. Section is resources. These are starting to get into the sections that you really want to make sure that you're familiar with. Resources and forms are where you land most of the time. In the resources section, there is a link to online, so that is one thing that's available here. The other thing available is the implementation plan itself. So if you'd like to read the whole thing, and it's 48 pages of glory, you can grab the whole thing here instead of just getting the highlights from me today. As well as our AHP regulations. So I know that we are federally regulated, and there are certain policies within the implementation plan that are regulations. So you can see the actual regulation there if you would like, so that you can see which policies may or may not be regulation. So income limits are also in this section. The income calculation guide, we've talked about a few times. It's actually linked in two places. There's one link here and then in the income calculation training section. So you income calculation guide here for those that will be completing income calculations. Definitely recommend reading through that guide to get information on documentation requirements and filling out the income calculation workbook. The other document here is our income limits. So I mentioned that we use the USDA income limits. We publish them here. So you can grab that document here. You can open it up. It's sorted by county. Look up your specific county as applicable and figure out what information, what the income limit caps may be for each specific targeting category. Last thing is tools. The AHP Online sponsor and membership registration guide is here. If you have an individual in your organization that needs to get signed AHP on, this is the guide that they'll need to sign up. The other thing available here is our scoring commit user guide. So mentioned this earlier when trying to figure out how to document your score commitments. This is the user guide that you're going to want for that. So this is under the resources section under the tools subheader. So make sure you grab that. We will be updating this here in the next few weeks to add that additional climate resiliency scoring commitment. All right. There's some additional resources in this section as well about homebuyer education. It says homebuyer and homeowner education. Apologies for the lack of additional clarity there. So if you are doing the home ownership education requirement, we would have checked an application to make sure that the provider you're planning to use is certified by one of these agencies. But if you do decide to change the organization that you're working with for home ownership education, you'll want to make sure it is certified by one of the 4 agencies listed here. You can go to the links there to find out if the organization is accredited under them. Okay. So then we get to the forms section. This is where you're going to find that lovely feasibility workbook, the income calculation workbook, the final cost certification. All of those things are going to be located and linked here. You will want to make sure you go under this owner-occupied disbursement forms. You are an owner-occupied project in the disbursement phase of your project. So this is the section that you're going to be referring to. The income calculation workbook, also a zero income cert, a profit and loss statement and VOE template. These are referenced in the income calculation guide, and it will let you know if you need to utilize any of these specific documents. So those are available here regarding income. Then there's the final cost certification section template. There is a real estate retention agreement. Our rehabilitation projects are not subject to retention, so you can ignore this document. You do not need to have your homeowners sign a retention agreement. So please ignore this document. No retention agreements for our rehabilitation projects. The other thing on here is our feasibility workbooks. So again, I mentioned earlier that we've got multiple copies of the feasibility workbook here. Please make sure that you always use the 2025 projects feasibility workbook for your 2025 project. If you try to use one of these other year to the system. So even once we release a 26 and a 27 and a 28, you will always 2025 projects because that corresponds with the year you were awarded. So please make sure to grab that template here. We did just update all of our templates all the way back to our 2022 projects, as well as our income calculation workbook template. So for those of you that may have previous year's projects, please make sure to go to the website and grab the new templates that were just released this week. And then for our 2025 projects, of course, this is the very first template we've released, so you don't have to worry about anything old out there. We don't really recommend saving these templates to your web or to your computer because we do update them periodically. So please make sure you're always using the most recent template. It usually addresses adding new income limits, things of that form. So you'll want to make sure you grab the most recent one, and your reviewers will be watching for that when reviewing your disbursement requests to make that you are using the correct template. So make sure you grab the most recent template from the whenever you need one. All right. The last thing that I want to cover on the website, we get into AHP Online, is this income calculation training section. So here is another copy of the income calculation guide. This is the same one sources section, but we've linked it twice for convenience. The remaining items here are actually video tutorials of how to fill out the income calculation workbook using different types of income, as well as just how to fill out the main household summary tab that we were looking at earlier. So if you'd like to see a video tutorial, I have to give credit to our team that works on our turnkey grants. They are the ones that created all these tutorials. They use the same income guidelines we do for the AHP program. So they created all these wonderful tutorial videos as well as the income calculation guide to help with all of this. They've done a wonderful. So make sure to grab those documents here or grab those videos if you would like additional information about income calculations. Okay, so that covers the majority of what we've got on the public website. One note I do want to make is that if you are working with your reviewer and you need to email us information that has private information on it, personally identifiable information, things like pay stubs and stuff like that, things that we want to keep secure, please make sure to use our secure email portal Proofpoint. We used to have a link on our website for those that have used our website previously, but due to changes in our security standards, we have to send you a link directly to get signed up for Proofpoint. So if you are not already signed up for Proofpoint and you need to send us something securely, please shoot your analyst an email and they will send you a link to get signed up for Proofpoint so that those secure emails back and forth without compromising of your information. Okay, so gonna grab a few questions here before we go into AHP Online. We're gonna do an example on AHP Online. First, I saw a couple questions come in. There. So we saw someone ask about Proofpoint. Perfect. The Proofpoint link is now gone from the website. Shoot us an email if you do need that link, and we'll get you something to sign up for Proofpoint. So I see that one. Documentation about the punitive list. The punitive list is kind of just an internal document, so we don't have any like public-facing policy documents regarding the punitive list. If you are placed on the punitive list, it's very specific to the project and will provide information to you regarding why you may be placed on it, and will in advance of ever placing a project on the punitive list. So it's not something that we're just randomly going to throw you on. It is something that will reach out and try to resolve the issue outside of a punitive list entry before that. And then if it comes to that, then you will be well aware before you'd be placed on the punitive list. So Just something there. If you do have additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk about that punitive list, but otherwise, yeah, no public facing documents to that since it's more of an internal measure. And then questions are being posted on the Q&A button. So if you do have questions, they're being submitted in the Q&A function instead of the chat function so that I'm able to see them, but don't blow up your chat box. So that's what's going on there. Okay. Perfect. I think that covers all the questions. Oh, I got one more. Question about when you're going to be able to see your project. So yes, we have not released the projects in AHP online yet so that you can see them. We will be doing that here in the next week or two. So here in the next week or two, your project should become available in AHP online so that you can start submitting disbursement requests. So I think by the end of the week is really our goal, but give us just a few days into next week to get those all up and running. Are you required to have a certified home inspector approve the projects, or can you use a certified building inspector? So in terms of the inspection itself, either direction is fine with us. So if you have a home inspector versus a building inspector, we're good either direction. So you're welcome to use either one. Again, it doesn't even necessarily be a certified inspector by state standard. It can be somebody that's experienced in the construction industry in a more hands-on way, potentially, maybe a contractor, things like that. So if you want to be safe, of course, using a certified inspector is the safe, and you can just buy their inspection license. But if you would like to use someone that may be considered slightly more non-traditional, just reach out to us. We're happy to figure out how to get credentials covered for that. Okay. All good questions. Okay. I think I've got all the questions so far. So we're going to keep moving here, and I'll stop here in a little while for any additional questions that may pop up. So AHP Online, we're actually going to switch over now, and we're going to submit a pretend disbursement. So there are a few different links in the public website for accessing AHP Online. We did pass one of them earlier here in the resources section. So this is one way to get into AHP Online. You can also just bookmark it so that you go directly into it. When you do go to AHP Online, please make sure that you sponsor sign in and not member sign in for your partner bank that partnered with you on the application. If you try to sign in as a member, it's going to tell you that your login credentials aren't valid. So please make sure to sign in as a sponsor, assuming that you are, again, a sponsor organization that's running this and trying to submit a disbursement. Grab the sponsor sign in. I'm going to go into our test software to give an example today so that I don't mess anything up in the actual system. So excuse me for one, this is going to be weird. This isn't what it will look like from. Oh, sorry, this is the wrong one. No. Have to give it 1 second. I apologize. Okay, I have to give a big thank you to our friends over at Nebraska Housing Developers. They are allowing us to utilize their project as an example today, just to see an example. Again, nothing I do today is going to affect the actual system, but they're allowing us to use at least the test end of their project for our run through today. So thank you to them for letting us do that. When you open AHP Online, once we get all of the applications, or excuse me, the projects up and running here in the next week or two, this is see if you have multiple projects, you'll of course see all of your projects listed here, but you'll 25 one here in the next week or two. I know that's not available quite yet, but will be here soon. If you do not see your project for some reason and you know it's supposed to be there, just go to the funding round drop down, click the year that you're looking for the project, and then it should sometimes our system does a refresh and it goes missing for some reason. So just something to keep in mind. When you do get to here, you'll click on the project number for the project you're wanting to work on. It will take you to the project summary. So this just gives general information about the project, your project name, the sponsor and member and things like that are listed on here. If you had any conditions or documentation modifications, stuff like that would show up here. So you can see all that on here. Some other resources that are available from this tab, aside from the disbursement, under the tab, there's a project profile. This will give additional information regarding the amount of subsidy you awarded, what your categories are, things like that. So you can check that out there. There's sponsor and member information. These are the individuals from both your organization, the sponsor, and the member organization who have access to AHP Online for your project. So you can change those contacts if you need to. You are also welcome to reach out to us directly, and we would be happy to help you change any contacts, add contacts, things like that. If you that. Then there's the conditions and exceptions. Your projects, for the most part, should not have any conditions or exceptions at the moment since you have not started yet. So those will most likely be blank starting out the gate. So nothing exciting under there. But if you do have any exceptions approved in the future, you'll see them show up under the exceptions screen. The documentation required is used for project completion reporting and some other stuff. Nothing you need to do. And again, none of you would have modifications at the moment, so that screen's going to be blank right now. But if you do modifications done in the future to your scoring commitments, those would show up on that screen. I'm going to come back to disbursement. Monitoring, when you are ready to do a semi-annual report in July, of course, yours will be in July for that first one. This is where you would access those reports to complete them. And then extensions, if we do need to do an extension to any guidelines, this is where you would request that extension. We'll have a conversation via email with you or on a phone call or something before you need to request it, and we'll let you know if you need to request an extension. So wait for the go-ahead from us before requesting any extensions in the system. Okay, we're going to be in the disbursement section today. I'm going to go to the disbursement home screen first and just show you this. You'll see there is a disbursement down here testing the system this morning. So that's what this disbursement is down here. But a good way to show what it looks like when you have initiated a disbursement. So this disbursement home screen is going to show general information about your award, how much money you have, how much you've dispersed, how much is left. So a good way to track how much money you have if you're not tracking it elsewhere. It also has a list of all the disbursements that have been funded, are under review, all of them that you've created in any facet in this disbursement request section. So you can see I created one earlier this morning. It's in a pending status because I'm still working on it. So I haven't submitted it to us here at the bank. So it's just sitting pending. If you are working on a disbursement and you don't finish it in your first sitting, you don't have to finish it in one sitting. That's totally fine. You can work on it over the course of days or a few months if that's what you'd like to do. To get back into your disbursement request, all you do is click the disbursement number here. You can continue to edit it and work on it as you were before. So we're going to start one from scratch today for the clarity and just walking through all the steps. But this is what it would look like when you have started creating additional disbursement requests. Again, when we're talking about that maximum 8 disbursement requests that can be submitted at one time. This pending disbursement I have right here that I'm still working, it does not count towards that 8 maximum. It does not start counting towards that 8 until submitted to us at the bank. So you're welcome to initiate disbursements and start working on them, upload documentation as you receive it for the household, things like that. But as soon as you submit it to us here at the Federal Home Loan Bank, that's when it starts counting towards your maximum 8. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and initiate a disbursement from scratch. There's 2 ways to do that. The first is clicking this request disbursement button right here. The second is going to the drop down and requesting a disbursement. Both of them do the same exact thing, so it doesn't matter which one you choose. We're going to go ahead and click this one and we'll get started. Okay, so this is the initiation screen, very first screen. The first you need to enter is the disbursement request amount. So this is the amount of AHP subsidy that you are requesting. So this should match whatever you put in your feasibility workbook. We put 18,250 in our feasibility workbook earlier. Just happened to pull that number. But if you're not sure, go grab your feasibility workbook, check for that number, and plug in that same number here. Again, it needs to be rounded to the nearest dollar. The system will not disperse out and change. It will be sad. So make sure you round that down. Then there's the uses of funds section. I should note anything that has this little asterisk next to it or a little diamond. There's no diamonds on this screen yet, but you'll see them in the future. Anything that has asterisk next to it is a required field. So you must fill it out in order to be able to save the page. So please make sure that you're filling out all information that has the little asterisk next to it. So the uses of funds section, we only have one option, and that is rehabilitation. Select that one. For the types of assistance, you can see we have the home ownership counseling class as an option for scoring on this project. So that shows the potential type of assistance as well as just rehabilitation. We'll be selecting rehabilitation every time, but if you do have someone with a home ownership counseling commitment that has actually taken the class, you can select both as applicable. So these things are kind of just generally for reporting purposes. If you accidentally select the wrong ones or anything like that, it's not going to cause a big hiccup or anything crazy on our end. We can fix stuff, no big deal. Okay, the next thing is going to tell us that the requested funds will be dispersed to the member partnered with. Specific example, First National Bank of Omaha is the member of this project. When we are reimbursement, once we approve a disbursement request, we at the Federal Home Loan Bank will disperse the funds to your member. So in this case, First National Bank of Omaha. And then you will have to work with your member bank to decide how you would like to receive those funds from them. Whether you guys set up an account with them, some sort of checking account or something like that they deposited into directly out to you. That is between you and your member, how you would like to receive those. So please make sure you coordinate that with your member so that when we disperse funds, you know how you're going to be able to receive those. Okay. The next thing is the closing date or rehabilitation completion date. So we've talked about this date a lot. We entered it on our final cost certification earlier, if you recall. We said that our rehabilitation completion date is of this year. So we're going to enter that here. If the date you enter here does not match your final cost certificate, your reviewer will be reaching out with questions. So please save them some time, save us some time. Make sure that the date you enter here matches your final cost certification. Okay. The last question is asking if this is the final disbursement request for the project. Assuming it is not the very last disbursement, you will be clicking no the whole time you reach that last disbursement. If you forget on the last disbursement and you accidentally click no anyway, we can fix that. No big deal. So don't panic if you forget on that last one. It's easy to just get in the habit of clicking no over and over. So no for the most part till that last one. All right, the last section is disbursement request comments. This is not required, and most people leave it blank. If you have something you would like your reviewer to know about the disbursement request that's not included in any of the other documentation that you're going to upload, things of that form, you are welcome to put comments in here. They are not required by any means. Most people, again, leave this blank, and that is totally fine. So we are going to leave it blank for this one, but if you did have additional notes, feel free to stick them in there. All right, so we've got everything with an asterisk filled out. So from here, we're going to go ahead and click the submit button. And assuming I've done everything correctly, it may spin for a minute. Not too bad. It's going to assign a 5-digit disbursement number to my request. So this is that disbursement number that was showing up on the home screen earlier. When you need to go back and work on a disbursement again, you'll click the disbursement number in the system to get back into your disbursement request. So something to just keep track of. It will be attributed to the homeowner name that you enter, so you'll be able to see the homeowner name and things like that too to figure out which one you're working on. All right, so we're going to click continue. And it's going to take us to the disbursement request home screen. You can see that the very first screen entered here does have a green check mark. That's the screen that we just filled out. So it's telling us that we're good to go. We filled out all the information on that screen. The rest of the screens, though, have red X's, which mean we have not filled out anything, so they are completely blank. We need to make sure that we have green check marks all the way down before finishing this so that we can submit the disbursement. It will not let you approve the disbursement unless you have green check marks all the way down. So make sure you've got that before trying to click approve. If you see a yellow check mark on any screen, that means that you've partially finished it, but not fully finished it. So you want to make sure and go in and finish that screen before trying to submit. There's a couple ways to navigate through the different screens. You can click any of the buttons down here, or you can go to this drop down at the top and the screens all show up here, and you can select any from here as well. You do not have to fill out the screens in order. Screens that will require you to fill out a prior screen to be able to finish them. Things like household in screen, you won't be able to upload your workbook to this screen until you finish the site selection screen, and it will tell you that when you try to upload something. So just something to keep in mind. There are a few that have prerequisites, but there's others that don't. The import spreadsheet screen is where we'll open or where we'll upload ability workbook. You do not have to fill out anything else in disbursement. You could go straight to import spreadsheet and upload your feasibility workbook from this point right here if you wanted to. So just something to keep in mind. I'm going to go through the screens in order for the sake of clarity, but feel free to hop around between the screens when you're working on them in your personal work. Okay, so we're going to start with site selection, and we are going to move through. All right, site selection. You can see that everybody will have a little site with a check mark. That's the site that's most likely your office space or that you placeholder application. So we know that you don't know what households you're working with at the time of application. You'll have to qualify them later and things like that. So we enter your something like that as a placeholder until you are able to identify households. You can then see I put in an example one earlier with my other disbursement I was working on. I've entered 123 Main Street, so that's disbursements property address. So as you create more and more disbursements, you'll see more and more addresses show up here. So just something to note there, you will have to add a new disbursement site for every disbursement request because each household will be a new site. So just something to keep in mind, you'll always be adding a new disbursement site up here. So we're going to go ahead and do that to add the home specific. So we'll click add disbursement sites. It'll take me to maybe. There we go, application details. You'll notice that there's some details here at the top that were entered at application regarding the city or county, the single site, all of those good things. You do not need to change any of this. Even if the property you're working on is not in Nebraska, for this example, we'll say, you do not need to change this. This is just generic information about the project as a whole. Please don't mess with any of this. What you want to do is go to this Add Known Sites button. When I do that, this box is going to show up here at the bottom asking me to enter the address information for this specific disbursement. So first thing I'm going to do is enter the street address. I'm going to use the address of our office. It knows I like to use this address for examples. So this is our office here at the Federal Home Loan Bank in Topeka. Feel free to come visit if you'd like. Our zip code, and require the +4 for your zip code. If you don't know what your +4 is, because I definitely don't know what it is for my house, you are welcome to go to the SPS website and they have an address lookup tool and it will spit out for you what the +4 is for the that you're working on. So you will need that piece of information in order to get this page to save. I know for our office specifically here, because I've used this example enough, that the +4 is 2448. So that's what I've got here. But again, the United States Postal Service website has an address lookup tool that will help you get that if you are unsure what it is. Okay. The address line 2 is only used if you have like an apartment number, a condo number, something like that. You do not need to enter the city and state and all that here because once you've entered this information up above, you'll click look up and it's going to pop city, county, state, congressional district, all that fun stuff. So don't need to enter any here. It's all going to populate over here once you put your zip +4 in. Okay. The remaining information down here is for reporting purposes to our regulator. There's like statistical information about some of this stuff. Some of these pieces of information will look familiar to scoring. This is not where we're checking scoring commitments. So things like, is the site rural? You may have a rural household. This is not where we're checking to make sure that the scoring commitment has been met. That's a separate screen. The information on this screen is strictly for reporting purposes to our regulator. So the main things that you will need to fill out, again, anything with an asterisk has to be filled out. For the number of units, you'll always enter 1 because you're working on one house. For the acquisition price, you'll always enter 0 because you're working with a homeowner that already owns their home. We're going to skip the appraisal information because 1, it's not required, but 2, no appraisal is necessary for REIT, so nothing you need to do with the appraisal date or appraised value. Same thing with site donated. This is going to be not applicable because again, their property. So not applicable for the specific type of program that we're running. Is the site rural? If the site is rural, are welcome to answer yes here if you know that based on the standards provided from the USDA. You can mark that rural here as well as on the scoring screen. But for this one, we'll say no. Of course, our office is not rural here in Topeka, so we'll say no to this one. But you can answer yes here. Just again, keep in mind, this is not where we're checking for the scoring commitment. This is just for reporting purposes. Next is targeted area. If it's in any one of these 3 specified by their specific federal agencies, you can select that here, disaster area, DDA. Again, we know these things are attributed to scoring commitments. This is not where we're checking for it, but if you do know that it's in a disaster area, you can go ahead and select it. I'm going to say not applicable for this. Then the next questions are going to be about land trusts. If you know that the home is answer that yes. Otherwise, again, for most of our rehab projects, we're going to be answered no. Then foreclosure, REO, or short sale. Generally, again, we're going to see not applicable on this one. So hopefully we're answering not applicable there. And then dwelling type. For the types of projects going on here, we're only going to be doing single family. So that's the option you want to grab here. And then the last required question asks any relationship or conflict of interest between the sellers of property and the sponsor, owner, or member. We are not dealing with the sale of a property in rehabilitation projects. Again, the homeowner already owns the home. So this is going to be answered no every time. Okay, the last thing is an upload of an appraisal. Again, not required, and we do not need to deal with an appraisal with rehabilitation projects, so you can ignore that one there. Okay, so from here, we've got all our information filled out. Again, the user guide and all those things go through all these steps and how to fill out this information. So feel free to grab that user guide. It's really tempting to click this back to disbursement site selection button here at the bottom when you're done. But if you do that, it won't save anything. So I think we've all learned that lesson once or twice here at the bank. So don't do that. Learn from our lessons. Make sure you click this update site button here in the upper right-hand corner first to get that to save. Once you click update site, you'll see the address that you just created, a list that had formed before of all the addresses on the project. Again, very tempting to click back to disbursement site selection, but before you do, please make sure you click save. Then you'll get this green check mark here telling you that that address has officially stuck. So make sure you get that back to disbursement site selection. So now we can go ahead and go back. And you'll see we're back at the original screen we started at. So I know this is probably one of the more complicated of the screens, just not necessarily in the information being entered, but just in the steps to make sure everything gets saved. Once you get the swing of it, not too bad, but just something to keep in mind. If you are unfamiliar with our system or haven't used it a lot before, I would definitely recommend grabbing the disbursement user guide and using it as you're filling this section a few times that you do. Okay, from here, I just need to click the check mark saying, yep, that address I entered is the one that's associated with this disbursement request. And then I will click save. A mark on this screen, and we are done with disbursement site selection. So from again, you can go to the drop down and then go to the next screen, which is homeowner selection, or you can just click the next button if you want to go directly to the next screen and it will take you there. So I'm going to click next and it will take me to homeowner selection. This screen is luckily one of the simplest after the really complicated site selection screen. This one's pretty simple. So all you need to do here, apologies, our test system cuts off this word for some reason, but we are just adding the names of all homeowners on the property. And this is just the people who have ownership in the home. So we don't have minors on this screen. Any adult household members that don't have legal in the home don't need to be listed on the screen. It's just the individuals who have legal ownership in the home. So you'll click add homeowner to the right of the address. It'll ask you to plug in their first and name. We'll click save. And then their name shows up right next to the address. If you have any co-homeowners, you'll want to make sure that you click this button. Same process, first, last name, click save, and then they'll be added to the list. If you have any individuals that are married, you'll want to make sure that their spouse is listed as a co-homeowner. All spouses by law in our specific district have ownership in the home via marriage. So you'll want to make sure to list any legally married individuals as co-homeowners on this screen. Okay, the screen is this a first-time home buyer? Again, we are not dealing with the purchase of removed for your guys' screens because it's not relevant, but you'll be clicking no on that question every time. Okay. Once you have done all that, you have all your co-homeowners in, you'll click save, and we should get green check mark on this screen. So we are good to all right, we're going to move directly to the next question or next screen. And it's going to be household income. So household income, what you'll want to do is this is where we're going to upload our income calculation workbook and our income documents to verify the income calculation that we completed. Again, this is a secure system, so you don't have to worry about uploading anything here. You don't need to send that through Proofpoint for this purpose. Anything uploaded to our system is done securely automatically. But if you need to send anything via email, that's where you'd use Proofpoint for information like that. The income guidelines utilized for this request, 99.9% of the time you're going to use the FHLBank Topeka income guidelines. If you do end up partnering with a Native American housing agency or are working on native land and think we need to be using those income guidelines, please let us know and we'll check that out for you. But 99.9% of the time, we're going to use the bank guidelines, which is the USDA income limits. Then it's going to ask if you filled out an income calculation workbook, including all household members. So this is your reminder to make sure it has all household members listed. So we're using the correct income limits. We'll say yes, and an upload box will appear. I'm going to go ahead and click upload, and I'm going to upload the workbook that I showed you guys a little bit earlier as an example. Once you do that, you'll click save. It may spin for a second. Sometimes it takes a little longer than other days, just depending on how the computer's done. And assuming that you filled out the workbook correctly, you should see some additional information from the workbook automatically populate, and you'll get a yellow check mark at the top of the screen. If you get an error screen, our system is fairly good at catching reasons that something may not be working. The main reason the information workbook doesn't upload is because there may be special characters in the names or things like that that you enter. Our system really doesn't like special characters for some reason, so it doesn't like dashes and names or any other sorts of special characters. If you're putting a junior or something at the end with a period, sometimes it doesn't like that or gets finicky. So try removing any special characters, and if that doesn't work and you're not sure what's going on, just let us know. But hopefully you'll get it to upload successfully like this. You'll see generic information about the household show up, what their AMI category is. And then it's going to ask you to certify that the information included in the workbook is true and correct to the best of your knowledge. We want you to be able to answer that yes, of course, and then it will ask you to attach the supporting documents for the income. So this is where you're going to stubs, zero income certifications, tax returns, whatever may be the applicable documentation for the household. There's only one upload box, so you will need to combine all the documents either into one PDF or into one zip folder and upload it here. There are a couple different types of documentation it will take. That's what this question mark is. So it'll take Excel sheets and things like that. But for the most part, you're going to want to either combine into one PDF or put it all in one folder, zip that up, and upload it here. So I'm going to go ahead and upload my test document here. Click Save. And then I'll get this green check mark. So that tells me that I've successfully uploaded everything necessary. Once again, we had that yellow check mark earlier. You want to make sure that you go all the way through and finish all the steps to get that green check mark here to be able to move forward. So we're good to go here. We're going to move to the next screen. Project status information. This screen, I talked really early on in the presentation about things that may require an exception to policy to be able to approve a disbursement, or things that may be regulatory. These are the questions that you'll want to be very careful with, and things that if you're answering no to any of these questions, you may need an exception to policy. So please make sure you keep these certification statements in mind, that if you are going to violate one, please make sure you reach out to us prior to spending money. We can approve an exception if possible, to be able to fund that disbursement, because if we cannot fund the disbursement. So just keep that in mind here. There are a couple things on here, I should say, that aren't technically aren't regarding exceptions, things like that. The main one being this last question here at the bottom. Certifying if the property is manufactured housing, is located on a permanent foundation, or sorry, it is a policy that would require, that is part of our regulation, but is the only one that doesn't have or that has an extra NA option. So you'll want to be able to answer yes to all of these questions, except this very last one. It says, I certify that if the property is manufactured housing, it's located on a permanent foundation. If it's not manufactured housing, then you're going to be clicking A on this screen. So just make sure, yeah, yeses across the board is the goal. If you click no on any of these, it's going to ask for an explanation. And that is a good indicator that you may need an exception and may need to talk to us about that. Got a question earlier, sorry, clarification about manufactured housing and a fixture. I understand what you mean now. So regarding the manufactured foundation, the main thing that we want to see there, one is that it's titled as real estate. So if it's if it has a property record card or a deed or something like that for real estate, that's going to tell you that it is affixed to a permanent foundation and is not a mobile home. So that's going to be the main thing. Otherwise, in terms of other documentation, I think that's the biggest things that we're familiar with from that front, because our big thing is just making sure it's titled as real estate. So if you're able to documentation shows that it has a real estate deed or something of that form, that should verify that for you. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and answer these yes. If you have any questions, specific questions, like the fixture question, good question, feel free to reach out to us or throw it in the Q&A. And the end of our presentation here. We'll do NA on this last one just because our building here is not manufactured housing. Okay, so I'm going to click save here. And then I should get my green check mark. So once again, if you click no, an explanation will be required. Good indicator that you'll need to reach out to us because it may be an issue that requires an exception or may not be able to provide an exception around. Okay. So gonna go to the next. Oh, maybe it didn't click. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so then we're going to get to scoring information. So scoring information screen, this is where you're going to indicate what commitments this specific household meets. So you'll see right now, all that's showing is just generic information. Can't click on anything, can't do a whole lot. The information that is showing here, though, is all the specific commitments. It shows how many units need to meet each commitment out of your total units. It shows how many of the units have been fulfilled. So these are units that have been funded that have met the commitment. So of course, with all your 25 projects, we haven't done any disbursements yet. So these will be all zeros at the current moment. Zero filled to date, but as you start funding disbursements, you'll see these numbers grow. And then the pending fulfillments column is going to be all disbursements that are currently under Federal Home Loan Bank review. So it does not include the ones that you are working on still that you haven't submitted to us. It only includes the ones that have been submitted to us and are currently under review. So again, you'll see those numbers grow as you submit disbursement requests to us. Now, in order to be able to select commitments for this disbursement, we have to answer the question here at the top. It's going to ask you to verify that the scoring commitments below remain applicable and will be fulfilled. So we're going to answer yes. If you're indicating no to that question, that indicates you may need a modification. So just keep that in mind. If you don't think you're going to meet one of these scoring commitments, please reach out to us as soon as possible so that we can have a discussion about what that would look like or if a potential modification is possible. So from here, we're going to select, you'll see check boxes appear, upload boxes appear, all that for the different scoring commitments. We're going to go ahead and check through the ones that we are going to meet with this disbursement request, starting with income targeting. So the income targeting, you have your different AMI categories. The big thing, this 30% category, are some projects who have committed to low income housing or rental, I think it's rental housing only that can qualify for it, but there's a scoring commitment regardless in the IP that's called extremely low income households. That's for the 30% and below. It doesn't apply to our owner occupied projects, but you'll still see this show up on every single project, and even though it's technically not a full commitment. So you'll see there's nothing extremely low income listed down here. So the 30% commitment here is strictly for reporting purposes. Again, a fun thing that our regulator for data, they want to know how many households are below 30, just for statistical purposes. So if you do have a household, even if it says there's a commitment here, we know extremely low income household commitment down below. This is not an actual commitment in the AHP agreement. You'll see it's not listed in the AHP agreement as a legal targeting requirement. But if you do have a household that is less than 30%, you'll want to make sure you click the less than 30% and click the next AMI category up. So if you have the less than 50% AMI category, this is the one that you actually need to meet based on your AHP agreement. So you're selecting the less than 50% to show that you've met it for AHP agreement and legal purposes. And then the 30% category is strictly selected for the purposes of reporting and statistics for our regulator. So make sure to grab those. If you do not have the 50% category, say all of your units are at the 60 to 80% category, then you'll select the 30% and the 80, even though technically they're not between 60 and 80. Really, all this is indicating is it's below 80. This 30% is for. Okay. So ours was below 50%. It was like 40% or something like that. So we didn't have the 30% category on this one, but just something to keep in mind. Then the remainder of these commitments, again, I'm not going to go through them one by one. I'm going to defer to the scoring commitments user guide to go through each of these scoring commitments and what documentation is necessary. If there is an upload box next to the commitment, that means that documentation is required to do select that commitment indicator, you need to go out to the scoring commitments guide and check what kind of documentation needs to be uploaded if you're not already aware. All these blue documents in the middle, these are the documents that you provided to us in application. So if you'd like to download those and see what you can view that here by clicking on any of the little blue links that you see down the center there. So one thing I will, anything that has your total number of units, so things like this preservation of affordable housing, everybody on this call most likely has this commitment because all it is saying that you're doing rehabilitation work on homes. And this is going to apply to all of your units. This has 100 units on this project, so all of them are listed here. So this should be selected on every single disbursement. No documentation is required for this commitment. You'll see no upload box, things like that. But I will note, even if you don't select this, and you go down and you click the save button down here, it is still going to give you the green check mark and say you're done. The system is not make sure that you're selecting everything that you're supposed to. So all these commitments that have 100 units should be selected on every single disbursement request. But even though I didn't select them on this one, it's still giving me the green check mark and is going to let me submit this disbursement. So just a heads up, please make sure you're watching that. The analysts assigned to your project will be watching for that manually. They will be manually checking that when they are reviewing your disbursement requests, but make sure to save them some time and make sure you're selecting those commitments on every single one and then grabbing any other commitments as applicable. Once we fund a disbursement, it is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to get new commitments added to a disbursement. So please make sure that you're selecting everything possible, because if you don't select it, then we don't know. So please grab those, whatever may be applicable on the disbursement request. So, all right. I'm going to go ahead and move forward. I know I didn't select everything on this screen. Again, just trying to move through and get done on time here. But if you have specific questions about scoring commitments, please don't hesitate to reach out to your analyst, and we'd be happy to help you figure out whatever questions you help. Okay, so next screens, we're almost to the end, I promise we're getting there, are our financial information screens. This is where we're going to upload our feasibility workbook. So the feasibility workbook we filled out earlier, I have a saved copy already. I'm going to click upload here. Then we're going to grab our workbook and we're going to click save. Assuming everything is filled out correctly again, it's going to give me this green check mark and say I'm good to go. Oh, you'll notice that the system has changed slightly. It used to upload a bunch of random information down here at the bottom when you uploaded a workbook. That does not appear anymore. So for those that are familiar with that, we have removed that because it just wasn't terribly useful to us. So you'll just be counting on this green check mark here at the top to tell you it's fully uploaded. So just something to keep in mind if you've worked on previous projects before. Okay, so I got my green check mark. And if there's something wrong with the workbook, the system's pretty good at catching what's wrong, and it will tell you in a lovely yellow and red text box what's going on and what needs to be fixed in order to upload the workbook. The most common error being that you grabbed the wrong project year. So make sure you grab the correct project year when working on the workbook. All right, so we'll move to the next tab, which is feasibility analysis. Ideally, this is what your screen will look like every single time. What this screen is doing is it's checking for anything that is outside of guidelines. Is your fee too high? Is your homeownership education fee too high? All of those things. Those things get flagged in red in the feasibility workbook, so you'll see them prior to uploading. It is very uncommon that we will provide exceptions around a lot of the project cost guidelines. So again, please reach out to us, ideally prior to completing rehabilitation work so that we can figure out if there's something that we can do. But again, our fee guidelines and things like that for sponsor fees, homeownership fees, things like that are pretty set in stone. So hopefully you'll see no feasibility issues here. It says no actions required on this tab. That's technically not true. You do have to click save to get this screen to give you a green check mark so that you can approve the disbursement. But that's all you have to do. If there's nothing outside of guidelines, you'll get this green check mark here. If there is something outside of guidelines, you'll see a box appear and it will ask for an explanation regarding why that item may be outside of guidelines. That is how you'll keep track of that there. Again, hopefully it just looks like this and you're just clicking save to get your green check mark. Last, we'll go to the commitment letter screen. This is going to be where you'll upload documentation for any sources of funds that are not the AHP funds. So if you recall earlier when I filled out the feasibility workbook, I said we had member financial participation. This is what's showing up here. It's an other source. I know it says other loans. Technically, this one was a grant. That's okay. The $500 amount shows up here, and then it asks letter provided, and it says no, which means I have not uploaded anything to here. So I need to attach a document. And here is where I'm going to upload the documentation verifying my member financial participation. Now, when we're talking about grants and loans, there's slightly different documentation needed. So for a loan, you're of course going to upload the documents that verify the amount, the rate, and the terms on that loan. For grants, you will have to provide to us a letter or similar award documentation that verifies three things. We need to see the homeowner's address, so something to tie that document to the specific homeowner. It needs to have the amount of the funding. So in this case, it's $500. And then it needs to verify that there's no repayment requirement. So that verifies to us that it's a grant versus a loan. So those are the big three things that you'll want regarding grants. So again, that's something to tie it to the homeowner, whether that's their name or address, the amount of the grant, and that there is no repayment required, some verification that there's no repayment required. So that will need to come from the provider of the funding. If you're working with a bank that is providing member financial participation and they have provided the MFP amount to you in just a lump sum and is letting you decide which households receive the pieces of that funding, then we've got some alternative documentation options in terms of getting a letter from the bank, and we can talk to you about that. Your analyst can help you figure that out on that front. So if you're in that specific situation, just let us know and we'll help you iron that out in terms of documentation. Okay, so I'm going to upload my letter by clicking Update Commitment Letter. You'll see this goes from no to yes, indicating I have uploaded something here successfully and I'm good to go. I'm going to click Save and get my green check mark here. Okay. Then I'm going to go to the next screen, and this is the last screen. So we are finally here. This is where we're going to upload all the documents that we have not already uploaded. So to upload documents here, all you have to do is click the edit button, click upload, update request document. We'll be able to move through these. The page does tell you which documents are required and which ones are optional. Closing documents are only required if there's some sort of loan or something like that affiliated with it. And again, that's usually going to get uploaded feasibility workbook. So really closing documents we're not going to see with rehabilitation work. The main ones are going to be the Center for. So your final cost certification, your contractor estimates and invoices or invoices, the third-party inspection and credentials. I will say once you provide the inspector credentials once for somebody, we will upload those to our internal system so that you don't have to provide them over and over and over again, unless they expire, of course. Then if a license expires, then we'll need the new license when it does expire. But we don't want you to have to upload the credentials over and over. We just need the form from that point. And then there's the proof of payment, of course. If you are using your final cost certification as proof of payment, then you'll just upload the final cost certification again as proof of payment. Then the last thing on this screen is miscellaneous. If you have a trust document, if you have any other sort of documentation that's relevant that needs to be uploaded, you can upload that as a miscellaneous document here. Then there's this has template column. This is just telling you if there is a template available on our public website for whatever form you are working on. So the final cost certification and the third-party inspection form do have templates. You are required to use our version of the final cost certification template, but the third-party inspection form, again, you don't have to use our template if you have an inspector that has their own form. but it does indicate here at least that we do have a template. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's required, uh, just we have a template available. So I'm going to go through here real quick. I'm just going to upload. I've got a test. You'll notice we love our acronyms around here. So if you see us say FCC or feasibility workbook will be FW in a lot of emails. Income calculation workbook will be ICW in a lot of emails. So if you're confused by any acronyms at any point, please don't hesitate to ask us. We get in a bad habit of using acronyms a lot. So just let. Okay. So we got all our required documents here. We'll say we don't have any miscellaneous. The last thing on this screen is the project documents. The document here right now is the AHP subsidy agreement. So this is everybody will have their legal agreement that they recently signed as a document in this project document section. You can view it, download it. It's just a document that's here for reference that we like to reference throughout the life cycle of the project. So you see doc here in this project documents section, there'll be documents that we have personally at the Federal Home Loan Bank added to that section. And they're just documents that we like to refer throughout the full life cycle of the project. So things like inspector credentials, you may see those show up here. We'll add them to this section so that and you don't have to keep uploading them over and over and over. So that we may use the section for. Nothing you need to do with it. It is strictly just for your viewing purposes if you would like to see it. So nothing you need to do there, just informational. So I'm going to click Save. And I should get my green check mark here. So once we've done that, we're going to click Next, and it's going to boot us back out to our disbursement request home. And you'll notice that we have successfully all the screen have all green check marks, which means we are good to approve this disbursement. You can still edit these screens even though they have a green check mark. If you need to change something, that's totally fine. If you see any yellow check marks or red X's, that means you need to go back to that screen and finish it before you can approve the disbursement. For this one, though, we've got all approved, so I'm going to click Approve at the bottom. It's going to ask you to certify the following things, and making sure that you've complied with all laws, legal laws, and making sure there's no covered misconduct, things of that form. So that's what most of this is. We're going to click Yes. And when we do that, you'll see that the status of this disbursement switches from pending to sponsor approved. So that means, again, at this point, we have sponsor approved it, but it also needs to be member approved before we receive it here at the Federal Home Loan Bank. So this is our test system, so an actual email is not going to go out. But when you do this, what would happen at this point is that your member contacts would get an automated email telling them that they need to approve this disbursement request. And then once they do, you'll see a status change show up on here, and it'll say from status sponsor approved to status member approved. And at that point, you know it has arrived on our desks here at the Federal Home Loan Bank. We generally are not tracking things that are sitting in a sponsor status. We just see it once it's member approved. So please make sure that you're tracking those. The main contacts in the system for your sponsor organization will receive an automated email when the member contact approves a disbursement request. So you should get an automated email, but you can also go into the system and view it here and see if it's changed status if you'd like to do it the manual way. Either direction, you'll want to make sure it gets member approved within that 90 days. So that is AHP Online. I just have a few last quick slides. You'll notice slides I send you, they're screenshots of all the steps I just went through in AHP Online. I'm going to skip those for the moment because we went through it live. And just go through the last few slides here and we'll be done. So this is a list of the automated emails that get into the system during the disbursement request process. So I mentioned that your member will get an email when a disbursement is sponsor approved, et cetera, et cetera. This is the full list of all those automated emails that get sent and who they get sent to. So if you're curious what emails you should be receiving or what your member should be receiving, this is what that list is. The next thing is about Proofpoint. So I've already talked about Proofpoint a little bit, making sure that we're keeping your information secure. This I PowerPoint link here a few days ago, so I haven't updated this image. I'll fix it before I send you these slides tomorrow. But if you need access to Proofpoint to send us something securely, please let us know. Just shoot your analyst an email and we will send you the link to get signed up for Proofpoint so that you can share those things with us via an encrypted email. Okay, the last thing I have here, we are excited again for you all, thankful for all the work that you do in your communities. And we would love to support any celebratory events that you do for your project. If you have any sort of ribbon cuttings, open houses, things like that, I know a lot of you do send us those things. Please continue to send us those things. We'd be happy to attend. We're also happy to assist with any sort of press releases or marketing materials that you may need. So if you're needing help with creating marketing materials or getting an event off the ground, I'd love to be able to that and to help you with that. So please let us know. Please reach out via email, and we'd be happy to assist however we can. Okay. So with that, my contact information is on this last page. Again, here tomorrow morning, probably, won't get them out today. Tomorrow morning, out emails to each of the participants on the call today, letting you know who your analyst is and what their email is so that you can contact with them directly, as well as including a copy of these slides so that you have them for reference. Feel free to share the slides with anyone. It's not private information. You're welcome to send them to whoever may find them helpful. Again, your analyst is going to be your main point of contact regarding the disbursement request process. They are the ones that are assigned to your project, will see the disbursements, will know the ins and outs. I'm always happy to help in their absence, or if you can't get a hold of anybody else, super happy to help still. Not that I don't want to talk to you all. Just we've got about 8 projects running right now that I gladly get to oversee, but our analysts are specifically assigned and are going to know the ins and how to help you best, which is why I refer you to them. So I will send those emails out tomorrow along with these slides. I will sit on here for just a few minutes. I haven't seen any more questions come in that I'm aware of, but if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in here in the next few minutes. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining. Appreciate your time today. I'll give you about 9 minutes back of your afternoon. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.